enjoy.
You're good? You have everything?
Yeah, I'm all set. Yeah, no, I'm wonderful.
Okay.
Wow. Wow. What a beautiful day. What a beautiful group of people. It's nice to see everyone today. We are about to dive into the RP Workshop. Our what is it? I want to say I wouldn't want to say second annual. It's our second RP Workshop. So first off, thanks for everyone for attending. A couple of housekeeping items before we dive in. The first thing is that it's important that everyone gets a chance to participate in the workshop, and with this many people, that can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. In order to facilitate that, once we get started, I'm going to let you guys get out of your system now. But please don't just like spam the side chat with a bunch of random conversations that aren't related to the current topic. Part of the reason for that is I am going to be asking people to, ask questions. Some folks don't have their microphones. As a result, we don't want like really good questions or, comments or stuff to just scroll past us. We all have a lot to learn from each other. The purpose of this workshop is not for, us to teach anyone here. It's for all of us to just hang out and talk about what we find works and doesn't work in our our RP journeys. So, with that being said, we can start to dive in a little bit. We'll start off with the PARP Workshop document that I've been slowly working on here. A couple things worth noting. We will be providing a copy of this document at the end of this workshop to everyone, so everyone has access to the content that's inside of it. I'm also recording the session as well, and will provide a link to that recording so that if someone misses it, or if there's something that you want to go back and get more clarification on, we can easily do that. So, with that being said, I'm going to dive in, and then we're kind of going to go from there. So the purpose of this workshop really is to help each other talk a little bit how we're going to develop our characters, especially with season 11 around the corner. I'm sure lots of people already have lots of really good ideas. Maybe you guys just have kind of a kernel of an idea and you want help building it out. That's kind of what we're here to do today, as well as go over some topics that were actually outlined by the community. So the format of this is this can be a collaborative workshop. We want to give room to everyone, not to just digest the content, but be able to ask questions both on topic and off topic. When I say off topic, I mean specifically related to RP workshop items, not talking about maybe the most delicious apple that is available to you commercially, which, by the way, in case you guys didn't know, it's a Macintosh apple. I know that might be controversial, but it's a scientifically proven fact. So we're going to present some of the topics that are near and dear to our heart and stuff that actually came up in our feedback and surveys, as well as the suggestion thread that we posted. We're going to go through those. Some of it might go pretty quickly. Some of it might go kind of slow, and we're going to try and be respectful of people's time and wrap this up within a couple of hours, depending on just how things, sort of roll. So we are going to be talking about a couple of topics, sort of to start. These topics are going to include things like cutting down on OC chatter, which I will get into and why that's been a little bit of a challenge. Creating meaningful conflict RP and antagonists. We're going to talk a little bit about non-value of life and the new life rule, why that's actually important to the community and to RP in general. We're going to talk a little bit about RP etiquette. We're going to dive into some robbery do's and don'ts. And then we got a whole other array of topics that we can discuss that we curated from sort of our previous RP workshop as well. So before we dive into this, I would like to open up for an opportunity for everyone who's here to, in the side chat, maybe just type one or two things, not a paragraph, but just more short words in terms of what you guys are looking to get out of this workshop today. If you guys are just here to listen, that's fine. Don't need to type that. But if there's something specific that you as a player are looking to hear or get advice on, or a particular topic, now is your time to throw that in the side chat. We'll see if some of that stuff aligns with what we've already set up, and we can obviously, go into the weeds from there. So I'll give everyone just a minute to type one or two things, and we'll go from there. All right, I'm seeing some good stuff so far. Yeah, some of these topics are near and dear to my heart, which I will be happy to speak to. Okay, cool. A lot of OOC is a big topic, and we knew that. That's something that has. So to give you guys a little bit of context, we obviously have our anonymous feedback survey that is available to all people to submit meaningful and constructive and detailed feedback. Just telling us to end the season already or something like that is not exactly what I would consider to be meaningful or helpful, although all feedback is appreciated. We will be having a session with the community to actually go over that anonymous survey and some of the responses that we've gotten over time, just for pure transparency, so people can see some of those comments that players have submitted, things they'd like to see, why we're going to do things, why we do some things, why we don't do other things, and then kind of go from there. So, all right, listen, so while you guys are typing some really great thoughts in the side chat, we'll dive a little bit into the OOC side of stuff. Now, I don't know, is there, I actually can't remember if there is a way for you guys to, there isn't really a way, there's no like hand raising, I just realized in this. So if you guys do want to at some point interrupt me with a question, oh, you can hand raise? Show me how. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that works. Maybe not like that. That's a little too Judge Judy for me. What I'll get you guys to do is maybe you could actually just type up in the side chat, like, raise hand, and I will try and get to you. Okay. So I'll say, hey, can so-and-so chat with me? And, you guys can just give me your stage would be better than a VC. I mean, I agree with you. Should we switch to a stage? You know what? Let's do it. Let's do it. Everyone meet me in unknown transmission. Go, 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 go. Wow. Wow. Look at this terrific audience. Wow. You love to see it. Okay. Let me get my screen back up for you guys. All right. So we will be using the hand raising system. So if you guys have a question, raise your hand. I will try to get to it, and I'll try my best to pay attention to those raising their hands as we go through things, okay? So feel free to raise your hand, and we will try and address stuff as quickly as possible to keep things moving along. Also, if you guys are going to, be typing in a comment or something, just try and make it as quick as possible, and then we go from there. Okay. All right. Let's dive in. So, like I said, we have received numerous feedback from the player base how out of character chat has been becoming a little bit of a problem. And I'm just going to read through the content at first, and then we're going to sort of dive into the conversation from there. Okay. So, why is OOC a problem? While the communication is sometimes necessary, excessive OOC really disrupts immersion. It breaks the narrative flow, and it causes unnecessary conflicts as well. RP needs to feel like a lived-in experience, not a constant back and forth of rule clarifications, personal disputes, or giving people pieces of information that just really aren't relevant to RP, playing the game, or asking a legitimate question. So, an example would be, you guys got a delicious pizza that is coming to your door. Need to walk away from the keyboard for a second. By all means, OOC, hey, my pizza's here. I'll be right back. And then when you're back, you say, hey, back now. That's a completely legitimate use of the OOC command. Where we tend to have problems is where people say things like, hey, I'm going to take a big rip from my bong, or, oh, did you see the latest episode of such and such? And this is something that obviously I think staff, we have seen firsthand. But on top of that, we have, like I said, gotten a lot of reports from players that this is becoming sort of a spiraling problem. And I'm actually going to be speaking to what staff are doing about that shortly. So I think the thing that I noticed the most especially from newer players, is I don't think people talk OOC because they're trying to be disruptive or they're trying to break the narrative flow of things. I think a lot of it comes from having the appropriate tools, if you will, or the right verbiage to be able to convey things in an in-character way that avoids you from having to go like OOC. Like often, one of the things I will do is if I need to go AFK for a second, I will say to someone, hey, I just have to go into my head for a little bit. I'll be back later, right? And that gives people sort of a heads up that like, hey, I'm not going to be like listening to you because I'm up in my head. And then you can come back to the playing field just by, like returning. And that is a lot smoother way of articulating something like that than having to, say like, oh, blah, blah, my pizza's here. I'll be back in 5 minutes. Also going to rip the bong. Oh, hold on a second. It looks like people can't talk inside chat. I wonder why that is. Give me a second. Sorry, guys.
I think you need to invite them to speak, and then maybe let's try this. Ratman, try to type. Can't type inside chat. Okay.
Hey,
I did just put him on the spot. Yep.
Okay,
Can you type inside chat too?
No, I can't talk inside chat. Sorry.
Okay, got it.
All right.
Thank you.
You learn something new every day. Let me just check something here. Permissions. I want to change this. Okay. So maybe this isn't. Maybe it was the other forum was better. But anyway, we'll see how this works, and we'll go from there, guys. If you can't, sorry, I'm just trying to think if there's like a quick solution to this problem. All right.
Let's try this. Yeah, so it seems like we can invite people onto the stage to speak over VoIP,
Right.
but I think it seems like, side chat is probably disabled.
It just says that we don't have any permissions
All right,
to
you
send
know what?
messages in this channel.
Yeah, for that reason, because how about this? How many in the audience do not have microphones and want to participate? Can you guys just do a?
They can't. They can't
They can't
type
even do a
it.
hand raise. They can't. They can't.
Oh, I guess they can. No, I guess they can do that.
Just do a hand raise if you guys can't speak in VoIP, but you want to participate. So I'm seeing at least 1, 2. Okay. So for that case, what I will do is I will basically say for the 2 people who raise their hands, because you guys are in the minority, if you want to raise something, I'm going to give you permission. You can just DM me, and I will raise your question to the folks. Okay. All right. Let's get back into it. So obviously it's like important for us to stay in character. First and foremost, we are a role-playing server. And I think that sometimes what I tend to see from players is that it sometimes is very easy to blur the line between your character and you as an individual. If you guys want to have some banter about like shows you're watching or stuff, that's best to have in like a Discord or like some other side chat. That doesn't really have a place on the server as like sort of like a conversational mechanism. So it is really critical to not just, like for the sake of the rules, but out of respect for other players, that we're all staying in character as much as possible. This also means using like emotes in a clear and concise way. For example, sometimes if you're, like let's say you're standing, if you're like a slow typer, for example, and you're standing in a particular TRPG pose, and you guys know that like doesn't actually show the animations of someone typing, a really good way of, telling someone that you're, deep in thought is to use like a /me and says like, collects their thoughts and begins to respond or something like that. And that gives you an opportunity to, sort of convey that like, hey, I'm doing a paragraph of text dump here. One thing that is really important and that we all kind of need to remind ourselves is that it is just a game. And sometimes it's easy to conflate what's happening, like a character's actions, with someone's personal actions. And that tends to be where there's a big issue with OOC sort of bleeding into the IC world. So, instead of jumping to OOC chat, it's always best to try and working it out through an in-character like flow. Okay. Using OOC when it is only absolutely necessary is really critical. If you have a technical issue or a rule clarification or something, that's fine. But anything outside of that is really not appropriate and something that we really need people to start cutting down on. And I'm not saying anyone here is, oh yes, now you guys can type inside chat now. Woohoo. Okay. So one of the things that I think is really important is whenever you're dealing with an out of character dispute is take a big, deep breath before you actually like respond to something. Sometimes things, RP situation can be very emotional. We can all get caught up in what's going on. And sometimes it's good to just take a second to like breathe, think through what you're going to say or what your next move is, and then actually react in a more thoughtful or, a way that's more interesting to sort of further the RP narrative or the story. Okay. If you need to use DMs, like take your dispute out of a public chat. If there's something that's not going smoothly, that's something that 2 players are encouraged to work out between one another. Now, again, I say this in the spirit of, you're trying to come to a meaningful resolution about whatever is happening in the situation. That's not an invitation to DM people and start a flame war, start calling them names, or start being, like a jerk for any particular reason. Okay. And if you find that there is an OOC dispute or something that is going on, that requires escalation to staff, you may do so. Now, obviously, like, I think it goes without saying that we're here to promote like a safe and fun environment for everyone to enjoy themselves. Um, we are not necessarily here to be judge and jury for every single every single argument and dust up that happens. Like, we really get involved when something is boiling over outside of just being like a totally fair and play, like in character reaction, and something that is becoming more than that. So an example of that would be, there's a robbery that goes wrong, or not even goes wrong, but you get robbed by someone else, and you start getting into this sort of flame war with them, DMing players, harassing them, letting that bleed over. Super inappropriate. And if someone starts doing that, that's when you need to open like a ticket with us and say, hey, I'm having an issue with this player, here's the situation that happened, yada yada yada. So one of the things, and just so everyone knows, we're going to be making an announcement actually right after this RP workshop around sort of the out of character problem that we've been having with people. I'll tell you guys a little bit about what staff is doing to actually combat this problem. So the first is we're educating players on how to properly use OOC. So now is a good time if you guys do have a question on a particular OOC issue, feel free to put it inside chat. If there's a question like, hey, I was in this situation and I didn't know how to deal with it, or how do you deal with X? I invite you guys to throw it inside chat and we can talk about those particular situations. But this is the first step, is just having an open conversation, helping people understand how it's easier to sometimes convey something in character versus going out of character, having us see that and then have to mute players. So we are going to continue to mute players when we see out of character chat. So for me personally, like where I see this happening the most is during events. I see a lot of people getting together and just saying a bunch of random stuff that has nothing to do with the event. Some of it could easily be conveyed or discussed while keeping it in character. Frankly, some of it's just like lazy and people just want to say something. We are going to be continuing to mute people based off of them going OOC for more than one or two messages, or for anything that we deem as just totally not appropriate of what's supposed to be, or what OOC is supposed to be used for. We are going to start handing out longer mutes to repeat offenders. We do track player behavior. We know that when we've muted someone, we have a record of that. And when we look at people and we say, okay, this is this person's like fourth or fifth OOC mute, we're going to start handing down 72-hour mutes. This mute will be both for text and for voice, and it will be done when people have been warned, like very appropriately, when during their first offense, it's like, hey, a reminder, blah, 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 next strike, you're going to be getting a 72-hour mute. If players continue to, despite this, continue to talk OOC, we will start handing out 72-hour bans to those players who are flaunting the rules. So if someone is in a situation where and I mean, again, this is something where the staff team can only be in so many places at one time. And as a result of that, and this is actually going to factor into a couple of the topics we're going to talk about today, whether it's non-value of life, new life rule stuff, whatever. We rely on you guys and the community reporting stuff. So if you see something, say something. It's not about getting people in trouble. It's not about trying to police people. It's about trying to improve the overall health of the community, making sure that you're being respectful to other people and the people who are staying in character. And so we are going to be taking measures, and they're going to be increasing. And I mean, again, like this is just an example of some of the penalties. If we have someone who just continues to flagrantly violate the rules, it may result in a even longer ban. So that's something to to take into consideration. Rat says, there would also be a good moment to add something about mixing in character with out of character. Sure. We can talk a little bit about this because I think this is something that I've been playing on Project Zomboid, or PARP, I should say, for quite some time. I personally have fallen into this trapping where something happens to me and I've taken something particularly personally. This is part of growing as a player, is going through those experiences. You learn from things, you grow from them, and in the future you start to realize, like, oh, this probably isn't a personal slight on me. This is literally just something that's happening in character, and I need to interpret it as that. So it is important that we all take into consideration that it's a role-playing game. We shouldn't take things personally. The more that you can separate yourself from your character and separate what happens to your character as something that is like personal to you, the more fun you will have in the game, and the more enriching your whole RP experience will be, in my opinion. Can someone unmute Avi when they have a second? I don't know if any of the staff are around that can help with that. Another question. So how would you deal with people bothering you OOC? Well, I see, about an event that has happened not too recent and giving a displeasing gesture. By displeasing, I mean, do you guys smell that? I think it's old and so. We heard some shit about you and you're a hoe and so on. I mean, I think something to keep in mind is that, like, when we're RPing and we're playing as our characters, and we're going to get to this when we talk a little bit about like conflict and antagonist RP. I think antagonist RP and going after people and having conflict between whether it's factions or whether it's between individuals, it is valuable if it has a purpose narratively, if it moves the story ahead, if it contributes to like some really interesting RP. That to me is not an issue. It's when things become really just to I mean, the easiest way to put it is griefing. When someone just has picked a bone with you, they're coming after you constantly. Like, all good antagonist RP should have an end game at some point. And we also are, playing in an environment in which only you can kill you. So in some worlds, it would be easy to end a conflict by killing that person and taking their player off the board. That's not a tool that everyone has at their disposal unless you guys are working together and decide to do some kind of CK event. So it's very important to make sure that when there is some kind of a conflict or an antagonism going on, that it is in good faith of it being for good RP. And I mean, that's something that obviously can be very subjective, and we can talk a little bit more in detail as we go through here about what some of that looks like. But I think all conflict RP, whether it's individual or groups, it can be rooted in stuff that happened a really long time ago. Like, maybe a player is the type of person to hold a grudge, or they aren't. It really comes down to like the individual circumstances of those players, their background, how many times have they interacted? Is there a good reason for these, two parties to be constantly going back and forth? It's like, are they like the House of Capulet and Montague, where they have this like, deep divide that is always going to be fueling war and distemper? Or, is this something that would be fun for us to kick up some dust, cause some issues, and then squash the beef so that we can work together on something else? Sorry, I'm just reading some of the comments that are coming in here. So, talking about constant. Yeah, I mean, look, I think think one of the challenges that we have had, and I'll be very honest and transparent with you guys, is at the end of season, when the sort of the plot dries up, when there's nothing left to explore on the map, when there's not a lot happening, I tend to notice that players get bored. And that's where a lot of, I think, some of this like OOC slash, feeling that people are constantly getting attacked comes from. It's honestly just like a lack of something real to do. And then the player base ends up sort of cannibalizing itself, which isn't good. And that's not something that we want to see at all, which is why what I can tell you is that in season 11, we're taking a pretty organized approach to make sure that there's kind of things that are going to be constantly happening from the beginning of the season until the end of the season, so that people aren't just sitting around twiddling their thumbs waiting for the next lore drop. We really want to make it feel like a much more lived-in world where things are constantly going on, whether it's small mini events or, just little world-building things that we're going to be sneaking in there. We're going to have a lot for you guys to do this upcoming season, and I'm hoping that people will be too busy chasing down those plot lines, engaging with that stuff, having fun with it, to get bored and then just start going at each other like we saw in season 10. So I hope that answers your question. I know that like not everything I'm going to say is going to be 100% satisfactory, but continue to put in your questions, your comments, and I'll try to answer them as quickly as I can, as best as I can. So, just to kind of recap is like, we as a team are going to be stepping up our enforcement of this. We're going to be paying a lot more attention. We're going to be hanging out invisible, over your guys' shoulders. And you're just going to naturally see a decrease in OOC because people are going to get muted, and word should spread pretty quickly that it's like, oh, you better not do that. Like the admins will clap you if they see it. And that to me in itself will be a net positive for like the whole community and everyone that's participating. So before we start moving on to other stuff, does anyone else have any other questions or comments that they want to discuss, like in the side chat? I'm really interested to see, is there anyone who is like, I don't know how to say X in an in-character way. I don't know how to convey this thing that's happening in a way that wouldn't break the rule. So I'll give a minute or two for folks to type before we start moving on. While you guys are typing, I'll give you a really good example. I'm not picking on them, but I'm gonna pick on my good old buddy Squire, who opened a ticket a suggestion not long ago, and I had some really good discussions around, I think the ticket originally started out as a, hey, can we start making anytime anyone interacts with a claw, make it a CK event so that people, quote unquote, take it seriously. And although I appreciated it in spirit, I think there's a better way to handle that stuff. And so, for example, if you guys find that someone is being silly, or they're not meeting like they're not reading the room and meeting the tone, like that's a really cool RP challenge for you as a player to be like, dude, like shut the hell up. Like, why aren't you listening to this really important person that's like saying something to us that we need to know? Like, you're being disruptive. Kick them out. Like, tell them like, hey, if you're not going to take this seriously, like get the hell out of here. Like, go down the road, go yap with other people who don't want to pay attention to this. Like, act like you would in the real world and eject that person from your group. And who knows, some cool RP could come from it. And maybe someone will get shot, maybe they won't. But that's something that I highly recommend that you guys kind of take, like, manifest your own destiny in that way. Is, if someone's not taking a situation seriously, make them take it seriously in the game through your in-character interactions. Okay, so Nickname says, I want to know if a factional/group conflict RP will be nurtured better since it kind of was sour this season. So, I mean, we'll see. I'm curious to what you mean it was sour. Also wondering if permanent faction conflicts, just like factions hating and not engaging in diplomacy, is that encouraged or discouraged? Because it's been put off for me in season 10 just to be labeled and hated. Out of character conflicts, they're related to IC conflicts. Yeah, okay, so I get the gist of your comment in general. There are a couple, like, there's never gonna be there's rarely going to be a one size fits all solution for every problem. There's going to be a couple different ways that you can deal with something, right? If let me I'm trying to break this down. The way that I would look at this is like, if someone is just hating on your character for no particular reason, that's a different story. But what I will say is that certain consequences have actions, right? If your player behaves in a certain way or rubs someone the wrong way, there are going to be consequences for that. Someone might not like you, someone might not trust you. Just like in a real world simulate, like, if you're in an apocalypse and you're like, oh, I stole food from someone. Food's a critical resource. They're never going to trust you. And that is something that, like, you as a player have to take ownership of. You have to take ownership of the actions you take, the ramifications of those actions, and what might be the blowback from that stuff. So it's important not to just be rash in how you conduct yourself, unless that's just your character and they're just a rash, person who likes to go off. There are consequences for actions, and you may do something that gets you ostracized from a particular group or a particular set of people. What I would say to people like that is you can make making an effort to endear yourself to that group again. So, I would ask anyone who's been in that situation, like, have you ever shown up at those people's houses with a haze bag full of ammo and been like, hey, I know that we've had our shit go down in the past. I know that we have, had X conflict, but, like, I'm bringing you a peace offering because I really want to squash this beef, right? If you're putting in the effort to do that, that often will be a lot smoother. And again, they're going to react however they want to it. But at least you, at the end of the day, can stand on your actions as a player and say, look, I made a mistake. I suffered a consequence for it. And I tried to solve that issue by changing my behavior or trying to bring that person some good loot or something that they might like, and at the end of the day, if they don't accept your apology or whatever, you kind of have to work around that. I think it can be very difficult sometimes for people, again, to untangle what's going on, in character and what's boiling over to OOC. Sometimes it can be hard to see that line. But it really is like a case by case basis. And like I said, there really is no one answer to how to solve that problem, but there should always at least be an effort in character, right? So, let's say you've got this flame war going on between you and another group, and you've tried everything under the sun to try and smooth it over. And if you really think that it's something that is boiling over from, like, an in-character thing, you can, address that with that player and say, like, hey, I feel like there might be some, am I reading the room wrong? Is everything cool? Like, blah, 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 blah. And then you take it from there. And it very quickly becomes apparent. It's like, oh, this is someone taking something that's happened out of character, or something that, something that's occurred between us, and, like, they're just not letting me bury the hatchet here. Another way to solve that is, and I know some people won't like this answer, but it is a potential solution, is kill your fucking character. Like, people can't be mad at someone who's dead, right? And people definitely can't then take that anger that they have towards you and pipe it into your new character, because that would be taking things out of character. That is kind of metagaming. And so at least it gives you, options, and say, like, okay, I have this character, I've really pissed off a whole bunch of people. what the hell am I going to do? It's like, well, maybe that person has to go away for a little while, whether they just like leave the county and come back after a while to let things cool off. There's a whole bunch of potential ways that you could solve that problem. Any other questions around or comments or stuff that you guys want to talk to around the OOC stuff before we start to move into conflict and antagonist RP? Ratman, I will let you speak, only for a moment though.
Okay, so this is just personally something I've noticed. Sometimes people will be having a out of character discussion, like using the out of character command.
Yep.
Is that allowed?
No. So, I mean, no. Like, out of character isn't like a get out of jail free card. It's not like, just because we're using this, it's out of character. And so, like, the only time that an out of character conversation, and another thing I should mention too, to add to this, is we are updating our OOC rules. You guys are going to see an update on that in the very near future in terms of what we deem to be in and out of character, because it's kind of there's some room for us to sharpen it up and make it a bit more clear. But yeah, like if two people are going on about, like I said, like watching the latest episode of some show, or they're just shooting the shit and they're just going OOC, that's not allowed. And if you guys see that, you can let us know and we'll take care of it. The thing is, if we don't know about it, we can't fix it. And so we do rely a lot on player reports of letting us know when people are, skirting the rules a little bit, and there needs to be a little bit of a corrective conversation, if you will. Does that make sense, Ratman?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. I know it's been heavily frowned upon by admins in the past, but I just want to clear this up because
Totally. Yeah. No, and I think it's, again, it really, there is an issue of like, like I said, we just can't be everywhere all at once. And it can be a tough thing to police. What I will say is that we will be really watching out for it at the start of the season, because, the way that I see at the beginning of a season is it really sets the momentum and the tone for everything. And if we have a really good start and everyone is getting really good feedback from the staff team on what they should and shouldn't be doing, it helps everything roll like a lot smoother. Okay.
yeah.
Cool. All right. Any other specific stuff around OOC stuff that anyone wants to talk about? Questions, clarification, maybe some specific examples of something that they've run into in the past? Avi, go ahead.
I just want to I'm basically asking stricter enforcement on OOC during big events, big RP events, because I'm so tired of seeing OOC in the middle, but I'm just trying to
100% expect that. So like I said, we are going to be, after this RP's workshop is done, I am going to be posting in the info and announcements like a big heads up to everyone to say, hey, we're amending our rules. We're going to be cracking down on this hard. So, Clem, this is a great question. I will get to that. Yeah, we're going to be cracking down on this hard, especially at events. I mean, I think, and I'm gonna speak to you guys very real for a second, which I try to always be. I hate muting people. Okay, I hate doing it. It brings me zero joy in taking someone's voice away and then having to have that conversation with them. And so often what I will see at an event is I'll see someone talking OOC and I will give them a second. I will be like, okay, hopefully they shut the fuck up. Like, please stop talking like this. And if they don't, then yes, we're obviously going to mute them. There's other staff who are much quicker to the gun, and it really depends on who you get. That being said, we want to make sure that your interactions with staff are as consistent as possible. And so we as a team behind the scenes have kind of all agreed that look, this is an issue. We need to wrap our arms around it and take care of it. And so part of that will be Avi, is to more aggressively go after that, especially at events. There will be basically a zero tolerance policy for it, and we will even put that in some of the future event posts and stuff.
Yeah, and I've got a second minor thing.
Okay.
I would love some clarification, in the rules or something about whether the radio is
That's
in voice or in text, because a lot of people correct themselves when they don't need to, and that sort of stuff, and it's kind of annoying.
Totally. And I think that's actually a really good point. So number one, the rule clarifications are going to really revolve around what channels are allowed to be out of character, if any. Some people are under the impression that their faction channel, not faction channel, sorry, their private radio frequency that they've selected is somehow out of character. It's not. It's a fully in character conversation. Staff see these things and we will mute you. The challenge can be is when there's a lot of players on. That's a lot of radio frequencies for us to keep an eye on, but we do our best. So we will be clarifying the rules. We will be upping enforcement, and hopefully with those two actions, we'll be able to get a bit better, just a bit better of immersion thing going on. Does that make sense?
I mean, it didn't really touch on what I originally said, but it does make sense in its own right.
Sorry, let me.
I would love clarification on, because there's a lot of people who think that the radio 001 is in text or is in voice, or not
Oh yeah, sorry,
systemly, but
in
how
yeah,
how in character it is,
yeah, and how
people correct themselves when they don't need to, for example.
You mean correct when they spell something incorrectly or something like that?
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is that one's a little bit of a challenge, because some people are just going to do that. That's really hopefully sort of a maturity thing. As you play more on the server, you just kind of get this, you learn over time that it's people are going to, I mean, if you ever heard some people, how they type, they purposely type in a very obscure way that makes it hard to read because that's their voice or whatever, right? So yes, I would like to see less of that. If we see, one of the things that we are going to be taking a bit more of a hard line is there are some players in the past who have seen, they're not necessarily regulars or something, where they just do not seem to give a shit about trying to type properly. And if we see really low effort like that, where someone is just making constant spelling mistakes and not giving a shit and always just correcting themselves, then we will take corrective action. Okay.
Well,
all right, cool. I'm going to invite Logicon to speak for a second, because they were next. And then we'll get to, because Clem had a really good one, and then I want to get to the other ones here too. Oh, did I thought I invited them to speak. There we go.
Hello, sorry.
Hey, no worries.
Discord is being weird. I actually wanted to comment on what Clem said, because I actually asked the same thing last time.
Yes.
And you gave me a really good response, and I tried it out. So you told me essentially OOC, when a new player is coming in, you're trying to teach them lingo and stuff.
Yes.
OOC should be a last resort. The way I've done it is to explain it in an RP way, and then right after clarify what I mean. So when I'm saying, this it's gonna be 10 cosmic minutes, and I'll just be cosmic equals real life minutes. But then I don't stay on OOC. I immediately go back to RP chat, because I'm just trying to clarify. Here's what this means. Now that we can go back to our normal conversation. But overall, going into OOC with anyone should be almost a last resort almost.
Totally.
It really should not come up at all.
So
that's all I want to say.
No, and that's actually that brings up a really great point, which I will kind of maybe expand on a little bit. I think one of the fun challenges that lets us try and be more creative, it really revolves around, how do I express this out of character thing in a way that sounds IC. So, something you can say to a player is like, when they're trying to get into a car, it's like, I see people say, use your V muscle, or,
Right.
like just trying to find a way to convey that information that isn't going OC. Let me kick it to you in a little bit of a different way. If I am strolling past Clem's place or the sanctuary or something, and I literally see you guys with someone who is clearly a new player, because we know who's new and who isn't, like we pay attention to that stuff, and I see Clem going 5 or 6 messages out of character, trying to explain to someone like the rules or how to do things, to me, like, you are at the very least, that is in good faith, right? That is a good faith OOC conversation where you're actually trying to convey something important that is very difficult to convey in character. And it's kind of like you said, like a last resort, right? Is using that as little as possible. Like if someone isn't exactly like if someone isn't getting like V muscle, what do you mean my V muscle? Then you go /O and say V on your keyboard. Because then they'll know every time you say your T muscle, your C muscle, they'll know, oh, they mean this on my keyboard, right? And it's also an opportunity for us to like educate the newbies, right? And to teach them. Because like, something I've said to like some people on this call before, whether it's in tickets or just in their conversations, it's like, look, a lot of you guys here are veterans. You've been around for a long time, right? People look up to you. They look at you guys to set an example. And, like I said, we know who the diehards are. We know who are always contributing to like really great RP, and like, no pressure, but like we expect more of you guys in a way, right? Like we expect them like, oh man, like, Logicon's been around for a while. I've been playing with them for a couple of seasons. Like I know they're capable of this, right? And so, if you guys, one thing is if you're never sure, you can always ask us in questions and bugs and say, hey, how do I convey this in an in character way, because I'm really struggling with it. And that's something that's completely acceptable for us to hash out in questions and bugs real quick if you have a question in the heat of the moment. I know it's never like, again, not all these solutions will apply to every single situation, and sometimes you just have to go out of character to facilitate a particular interaction or to get a point across. Okay.
Yep, that's about it.
All right. Sick. Cool. Okay. Well, why don't we, if everyone, another question, what if you're KO'd by leaving your laptop and sleep on accident? What is referred to as a body, sleeping body? I mean, that's a great question. I always say like, so you should never talk about your body. What I always tend to say is, did you find my stuff? Hey, did you find my stuff? Do you got my bag? Do you have my gear? Did anyone find my things? I dropped them. Yeah, exactly. I dropped my bag. So if you could just say like, hey, can someone keep an eye out for my stuff? That's always a better way than saying like, oh, it's like, can someone grab my body? Because that's the type of stuff that breaks immersion pretty quickly. And you even will see this on 001 where people are like, what do you mean your body? What do you mean you're dead? Like it, no, and for sure. Again, this is why we have these chats and host these sessions, so we can all share ideas and tips and tricks and just like, get better together. Okay, I think we can start to move on. We can come back to this a little bit more if you guys do have stuff that you want to expunge on or go for, like just get further clarification. Something comes back and we get to the end of the content and we want to keep going on about another topic, we will. So let's talk a little bit about conflict and antagonists. I see a few more people typing, so I'll wait for them to finish before I fully move on here. Okay. All right, let's move on. So let's talk a little bit about conflict, antagonists, how to create meaningful conflict, how to be a good antagonist, and what antagonism and conflict is about in general. I can say that like some of my favorite moments on PARP and some of like the coolest stuff that I've been involved in has gravitated around conflict RP, right? Having arguments with people or having faction wars or whatever that looks like. When it is fun and exciting is when it's meaningful and it actually drives the story forward, as opposed to being something that feels more like spiteful and like someone is just doing something for the sake of doing it. So, for example, I think a server without conflict gets really boring, really fast. Something that actually came out, excuse me, in our anonymous feedback survey was around the staff team making sure, like this season, I'm all about admitting when we make mistakes or when we don't hit the mark or we don't do something that we probably should have done. And one thing that was definitely missing in season 11 was an actionable antagonist, like a big bad that people could go after and pick at and fight with and war with. Like having internal conflicts between players is absolutely necessary. It is really fun. It can lead to a lot of good RP, but when in a vacuum, that's when sort of things can tend to get a little bit out of control or get unbalanced. And so that's something that we're going to be taking like very seriously moving into season 11. We've got a couple of really great ideas for how we're going to keep the heat on, and how to create some meaningful antagonists in the game that will actually get players really excited about, okay, like it's not just about, starting a war or fighting these people. It's about really getting down to the bottom of their motivations and why are they doing what they're doing. So obviously conflict RP is essential for storytelling, but it should be engaging for everyone. Good conflict RP, has a reason that is based on something that makes sense to people. It has consequences. So if you start a fight with someone, you really should be prepared for the reaction. If you go around and you start pushing people around or giving people a hard time, expect people to rise up against you and be ready for that. It's no fun when someone goes and, they start pushing people or shooting people and then they get shot and they're like, but what, this sucks. Like, I didn't want to get shot. It's like, well, you went and bullied some people. So you're going to get bullied back. Like, that's just how good conflict RP works. Bullying is also probably the wrong word for it. But anyway, and it really should encourage storytelling. Like, a meaningful conflict should really actually have a resolution to it. So, for example, if you have two factions that are going to war over something, there should be some kind of, there should be something that will end the conflict. And like I said, we're in an environment where the death of a particular player might not be something that you can get, but you guys have to be creative in finding like, what is the end? What is the resolution? No one is going to have fun if there's just a long-standing war between two groups that doesn't really make sense, where they're just beating each other up for no particular reason. Like, we really want things to have some kind of a meaningful resolution, right? And when you guys are diving into those dynamics with other factions, other players, you really need a good idea of like, okay, so if I start this fight, or if I am going to be an antagonist, if I am going to be someone who does this, what is the end game? What does that look like for me? So, for example, how to be a good antagonist. Being an antagonist just to grief other players, bad. Just for the shits and giggles is not really very good. But creating a compelling villain with motivations and depth, someone who, for example, is trying to overthrow, like, to use an example is, if there's a faction, there's a leadership issue, right? And having these people within their faction fighting for the top dog position so they can lead the faction into tomorrow. Like, that is something that actually moves along a story. It has some actual interesting motivations to it, and thus you can find depth in it. But if you just pick someone and you say, I don't like that person, and so I'm just going to go after them all the time because I don't like them, to me, that's pretty like low quality conflict RP, or just like not being a good antagonist. There should be a reason why you're going like after these people, right? So obviously just randomly attacking people just to cause chaos, not great, right? If you're a bandit leader and you're threatening particular groups because, you want to control a particular section of like the city, or you're trying to battle for resource access to like a gas station or something like that is some good antagonist RP. Okay, just doing it for the lulz, not great. Not it's I would say that's like low quality antagonist RP, and that's when things get a little stale. So before I invite, I think someone wanted to come to the stage, but they revoked their request. That's fine. But I want people to remember that like not everything needs to be won. You don't need your like good RP comes from people who can improv and in the moment can come up with like, they're like, okay, I want it, like I went into this room to do a deal and, I thought it was going to go either A or B, but now C is happening. If you try to force A or B, no one's going to have fun with that. Like you kind of have to go with the flow of a situation. And so sometimes that means losing. Role play and it is really about the larger story. It's not about us as individuals. We all contribute to a great, fun, exciting story when we're all doing it for the story. But if we're just doing things because we want to achieve objective, like it's great to have that motivation, but you have to be willing to let that go or let that die or lose, right? So sometimes losing can lead to like a really cool RP moment. And like I said, like a good story is about more than just winning. It's about the story, right? And it's about what is the most interesting and compelling way for me to move the story. Sometimes it's not about me getting out of the situation, with all my limbs. It's about like, seeing where this adventure takes me. Okay. So with that being said, I would like to open it up really quickly for if anyone has any particular like questions or comments or things specifically around antagonists. So I'm going to invite Ratman to the stage, and then I'll invite whoever else wants to come. So just put your hands up, and I will invite you guys. So go ahead, my friend. Ratman.
Okay, so this is a really weird question. As an antagonist, could you be a delusional guy who wants to use the Zeds to his, like, what's the word, fucking advantage? Or would that be considered power gaming? Because, yeah.
It's a good question. So as a general rule, we don't like, let me put it this way. When you just lead a shit ton of zombies to someone's base, it really comes across as like just griefing people, right? And so that typically is a no-no. What I would say was, for example, if you want to use zombies to your advantage, like let's say you're worried about, someone, like there's a meeting going on, right? And you're worried about someone like going to war with you or something. Sometimes doing stuff in an area where there's a lot of zombies, it can be very helpful because it's very hard to target someone if you are, you know what I mean? If there's like a whole bunch of Zeds surrounding you, you can hop a fence and it's like, oh shit, I can't hit this person, like because they're literally like untargetable right now. Like there's other ways that you can use Zeds and the chaos definitely to your like advantage. But luring them is typically like a no-no, right?
All right. That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, what I would say to you is if there's a particular situation where you feel like you're questioning whether or not it's something I should be doing or not, open an RP ticket.
No.
Open RP ticket. Just say like, hey guys, I'm in this, I've got this thing. I want to do X. What would you suggest? Like, can I do this? And we might say, no, don't do that because that's against the rules, but you could do this instead, or you can do that. If that makes sense. I'm just trying to read through some of the so I'm going to, if it's okay, does that answer your question, Ratman?
Yes, that answers my question. Thank you very much.
I'm going to invite Cheese Dorito to ask one. Hey, buddy.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Hit me.
Oh, fantastic. So, what was the word you used? Uncompelling antagonist? I think that's the term you used.
Sure.
Yeah. So, let's say there is that uncompelling antagonist, and of course, I understand that you can't necessarily see key them because that is their choice ultimately at the end.
Mm-hmm.
At what point, if they continue doing their anti-RP in a repeated fashion, would it be... How do I put this?
I guess you're asking, when does it cross the line?
When does it cross the line, and if you were to take it on an IC level and be like, okay, we're going to just keep hunting this person down actively until they stop? Or would that also be kind of crossing the lines of bleed or OOC? Because...
Like, yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm probably not going to have the best answer to that question or one that's going to be super satisfactory. Because what I will say is that it really depends on the situation. It 1000% is kind of like subjective. It comes down to, what's the background? Who are the players involved? How many people versus how many people? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it can be a little tricky to unravel that. I think what I would say is just that comes down to probably just like opening a ticket and saying like, hey, I'm in this situation, or I'm dealing with this antagonist. I'm not really sure how to deal with it or how to like circumvent it. Like, can you guys give me some tips and some tricks on how I would address this, right? It also gives us a heads up if something is starting to spiral, like a little out of control. Like I said, sometimes there's going to be a really good reason for people to hunt someone else to the ends of the earth. You know what I mean? Like, if you go into someone's community center and you steal all their food, right? Like, that's a compelling reason for someone to want to, like, really make your life miserable, right? I think the key is draw, like, if let's say you're on the antagonist side of that, is to draw a line for when you're like, okay, I've done what I meant to do, and I'm satisfied that that person has gotten the repercussions that they deserve. So whether it's like, I'm kicking this person out of our town for a month, and we'll entertain and we'll see how things go later. Like, to me, that is a lot more compelling than just continually, like pushing people out of the fray. But again, it really is situational. Like, it's hard for me to give an answer that will apply to every single scenario that you're going to run into. So that's just something worth mentioning.
That is fair. So there's basically layers to every cake, and every cake is built differently. Okay.
Yeah, totally.
That makes sense.
And that's what I mean is some of this stuff, like, there isn't really like a one size fits all answer. It's very subjective and it's very dependent. That's kind of one of the things that's like exciting about RP and makes like some of this stuff like really fun and enjoyable to do. Like, I think for me, at least, the way that I would frame it is like, and again, what I'm specifically talking about, guys, is doing things in good faith. Okay? So what I mean by that is like having like going into something with the intention of like keeping things completely in character, trying to make it interesting for the story, and also trying to like make sure everyone's having fun, right? Just because you have someone that you're beefing with, or you're having an antagonist come and like mess with you all the time, it doesn't mean you can't have fun with it. Like you can get enjoyment, and you can be really mad, and characters like, oh, I'll get you next time, gadget kind of thing. But like if you both sides of the party should be like trying to make it fun for each other, which is sometimes like easier said than done. But if you're sitting down and you're asking yourself like, oh, am I making this like, is this like fun for the other person? Because if you're trying to do something, okay, and you're like, I'm doing this so that the other person does not have fun, like the individual, the out of character person, the player, not the character, right? If I'm trying to grief so and so because they rub me the wrong way, then I would consider that to be in bad faith. Like that's not really good antagonist. That's just you beefing with someone and wanting to take it out on them, to call a spade a spade. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I think that answers everything that was in my brain. Thank you, sir.
No, cool. There's a lot of chat going on, so I want to try and address what people are bringing up. So I think so. One thing Pillow brought up was I think it's great to lose. Stealing the spotlight really only makes you feel cool, not everyone else around you. This is actually something we're going to talk a little bit about, is like reading the room. Like RP is like a big play where none of you are the lead. Everybody is a supporting cast member. And if you go to a play, let's say you guys go to something on, I'll just use Broadway as an example. You go to a Broadway play and there's 30 people standing on the stage, but only one of them talks. You're kind of going to sit there and be like, why does that person get to do all the talking? Like, when am I going to hear from these other people? Like, how do things happen? Like, that's not fun. Like, you need to make space for other people in other places. And that can be difficult when there's like 30 people in a situation. It can get very chaotic. It can get very confusing. But if everyone together is like working on that similar goal of making space for each other, it's something that really just tends to naturally happen, right? So that's something to keep in mind too, is just like really making sure that you're not getting, I don't even like using this word, but like, or this phrase, but trying to avoid that concept of sort of like main character syndrome. Like, you want to play your part in the play so that the entire audience enjoys the performance. And that means the whole cast participating in whatever role they have. Some people like to be quiet and sit off to the side and not say very much and just kind of like play the game, and that's fine. That's what you get to know the people in your community and the different players, and you're like, yeah, that's like so-and-so is pretty quiet. They don't get involved in these things. But making sure that like everyone has space to participate, to enjoy, like everyone is going to be having more fun with that, I feel like, than if you're just trying to bully your way to like the front of the stage and be the only one talking, or make things like all about you, right? Okay. Gatekeeping, is it a thing? Absolutely. Gatekeeping is a thing. And one thing that we are going to be addressing, particularly in how I'll give you a great example. And I don't know how many, some of you guys are new, some of you guys have been around for a while, and I'll just speak from some personal experience. I remember in season 8, I believe, which is the Durkerdam season, there were a couple of players that were like extremely adept at going out in the world and finding the lore. But what they would do is they would go into the world, they would find these notes or these items or these whatever, they would grab them, and they would never see the light of day. There was literally this small group of players who were the only people who had access to this information or this blah, 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 blah. And that kind of sucks. Like, that's not enjoyable for anybody. So something that we are going to be making, like, I'll give you guys an example, right? So when we did the Greenheart excursions, you guys will probably have noticed that when you went to, you know, the prison area or the chopper, that everything was really, like, all the items were weighed down so that you guys could not pick stuff. Like, no one could pick up a note and just take it. Like, there was no situation, and that's how I tend to, like, structure my stories. And if I'm doing environmental storytelling, I make sure that, like, if there's a note that someone needs to read, it stays on that shelf so everyone gets a chance to read it. Everyone should have an opportunity. There are some situations where that rule might not apply, where we want to have something where, like, hey, like, we're putting something out there and we're rewarding the first person who manages to go out and find it. But that should not be the go-to modus operandi for the main storyline, right? And so what we can commit to you guys very clearly is that in season 11, the lore is for everybody, and everyone is going to get a chance to it. So I'll give you an example of how we are going to do that so you guys can have some confidence in some of the solutions that we're bringing forward. So for example, let's say, and this, by the way, none of this is actually happening. These are just examples. Please do not get excited that you're getting season 11 spoilers. I would never do something like that. So let's pretend that there is there's a chopper crash, and you guys need to get to it. And there's some ammo and stuff on there, and everyone gets there, and there's a particular piece of lore, right? Maybe what we might do is we will give players who are expedient and quick an opportunity to get their hands on that document and on that thing. But within 24 or 48 hours of that one player getting their hands on it, the information that people need to know from that event is going to get posted in the main lore channel. So there's going to be a lot more updates this season, like constant, like the story so far. This event happened and here's what was found, right? And that is actually going to make it a lot easier for everyone to participate in this story, whether it's being on the ground for an event, right? Maybe someone's like, shit, I missed it. I was working that weekend. I couldn't make it to the event. Well, guess what? It's going up in the lore, in the lore post anyway. And so that you guys will all have an opportunity to participate in it, because there were absolutely things that people would get their hands on. They wouldn't share any information. And, like, let's be real. Like, part of what makes sometimes the game exciting is, oh, I got this cool thing and no one else has it. And it makes us feel special, and it makes us feel, it excites us, and it drives us in the story to be like, oh my God, like, I'm a part of this. Like, I got this, I got the thing, I got the cassette, I got the disc, I got the stuff they need, right? That stuff, like, we want people to still be able to have that happy feeling, exciting feeling, but at the same time, not leaving people out. So we have a couple of mechanisms of how we're going to address that. And I can tell you guys that in season 11, we are going to be making a lot of effort in making sure that the main story, that is the critical sort of main plot line that we are running with, is open to all players. Yes, there might be some side quests where it's just like a small little thing where the people who participate, they get that piece of lore, but it's not going to be something that relates to the main story, if that makes sense. I'm sorry, I'm just reading through. There's a lot of chat here, which is great to see. I like seeing the discussion. How about side stories? How much sharing and inviting stories are we allowed to encourage do? Like the secrecy, openness of the smokehouse sides. Yeah, so, I mean, if you're talking about side stories that, like, players are running, like if a player goes and runs like a side plot, that's up to the player. We're not getting involved in that. We're not going to police them and tell them, you have to make this available to everyone. It really comes down to the stuff that is sort of like sponsored and driven by staff. If it's something that we are doing, we are going to make it available to everyone and try and make everyone, like, at least be able to benefit from whatever that lore or that drop is, if that makes sense. Avi has a question. Will that lore be posted OOC or IC? So it's going to be sort of case by case, but it's mostly going to be IC. So again, without getting into any specifics, we are one thing that I am really excited about in season 11 is that we have a couple of fun things in order to contribute to a not just having the story. Like the story is great, right? Having a great story, blah blah blah. You have the best story in the world. But if you don't execute it, it can fizzle out. Or if you don't have particular mechanisms to keep the story alive and keep things moving in a way that is compelling and interesting. So without saying too much, we're going to have some fun little mechanisms in which players will be able to find out what is going on in character. It will make sense, like, narratively. And it'll be something, so when there is a lore post, you guys are going to be like, oh shit, yeah, like, it makes sense that information is being sent out to the whole player base because of this thing existing, or this person existing, or this particular profession existing. So we will be making a lot of effort in making sure that that's more open to people. Just reading through some of the stuff here. Okay, cool. So, any questions? Does anyone have any questions about antagonists before we start moving on to some more topics? I'm gonna give just people a minute or two to type here, and then we can move on. If not. And by all means, feel free to, if you guys want, you can raise your hand too if you want to just chat via voice, or just type your stuff in the side chat. And like I said, I'll do my best to address it as quickly as possible. Okay. Moving on. I think we're going to spend just a tiny little bit of time talking about etiquette, right? Things that are acceptable, things that are not acceptable. Oh, hold on a second. I have a question about this topic. If we have an area or a safe zone, can we request that stickers to prevent them from being stolen? I mean, yeah and no. I mean, if you have an area or a safe zone, request stickers to prevent them from. When you say prevent, like, you can't steal someone's safe zone, or you can't like get in unless you have been like. Are you talking about the stuff? Because I'm gonna I'll give you guys an example to maybe that this will help. Back in season 6, me and Smitty ran this place called the Temple. And in the Temple, there was actually we called it the dorms, like a dormitory area, right? Where we would we were basically the new player place to go. If someone joined up, it was like, help, I don't know where to go. Everyone would say, go to the Temple. They have rooms there. Like, we had rooms with key padlocks on them. People could go and stay there. I remember one time we were really careful about like getting to know people before we let them in, because it wasn't safe zoned. It was just an open area with like a key padlock stopping people from going in the main area. This new player came on to this, joined up, came to the Temple, went into the dorms, and while we were in the middle of chatting with them, they just logged off immediately. And so I'm like, shit, this person just like logged off in our dorms. Like, we won't be here to make sure that when they come back, that they don't steal anything. So I cut a ticket with staff, and I'm like, hey, this person is in our area, but like, we don't really want them there. Can you guys like kick them out? Or is there something you can do to make sure when they log in, they don't log in there? And the answer that I got back was, well, you should have been more careful with who you let into your house. And that's like a very, very real piece of advice for any area where you are letting members of the quote unquote public into your home. You have to be careful with who you invite. Like, that's a consequence of RP in the game. So if you're going to run a community center, if you're going to run stuff, your shit better be bolted to the ground, and it better be key padded to hell so that they can only get into certain areas or whatever that looks like. But that's a consequence of letting people into your world. And that's, to be honest, I don't think that's something that's worth having us get in the way of. So if you have coveted items or coveted tiles or coveted whatever, it needs to be in your safe zone, and you only need to let people into your safe zone that you implicitly trust. And if one of those people who you implicitly trust betrays you, that's possibly some good, compelling RP. So I'm never going to stand in the way of that. And so it really comes down to, you guys have to be very careful of who you let into your safe zones, who you let into your public spaces. If you're building a public space for people, maybe don't trick it out with all of this cool stuff that people can just come in and take. You know, have a succession of keypads that gate people's access to things, so that there's a public area where people can run into, and then, you know, from there you have sort of some other private rooms where you keep the good stuff, where you don't want people messing around. So I hope that answers your question, Phoenix. Okay, so moving on. I'm a bit on the screen. You guys have probably had a chance to read it, but I'm just going to rip it through really quickly. We're going to talk about RP etiquette, because obviously sometimes it can be easy to, you know, remind ourselves that, it can be easy to forget that, you know, we're all here to have fun. It really comes down to, it's a game. We should all be enjoying it. And if we're not enjoying it, we need to figure out how to turn that around. Okay. So a big part of that is respecting your, like, other players' boundaries. Everyone has different comfort levels in terms of what they find to be acceptable and unacceptable. And you need to make sure you understand those boundaries before you go into topics. So for example, if you're doing some RP where you kidnap someone and you're torturing them for information, you need to have that player's consent and make sure, like, yo, are you good with this before I take you down this road? Because this is going to get weird, you know, like, or this is going to get scary. Like, don't just assume, ask. And make sure that you have that person's, like, full understanding of the situation they're going to go into. I'll give you a great example of something that happened in season 9. Kodad and his crew, basically someone had gotten framed for doing something they absolutely did not do. And Kodad and his crew kidnapped this guy, brought him up to the casino, and spent, you know, a while, like, pulling out their fingernails and, like, doing really mean shit to them. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. The good old casino, dude. And so I love that shit. Like, I like it when people are telling cool, and the player went along with it. It was some of the best RP that I was like watching. There was a moment where I literally had to, like, I was invisible watching, and I'm like, oh, I gotta leave. Like, this is really making me, like, this is so good. Like, the dude, like, screaming and crying and like, please, like, help me. I'm like, I gotta go, guys. Like, this is, but they had a great time. They enjoyed it. Both sides of the coin were fully on board with it, and it made for an absolutely incredible experience. Even as, you know, as staff just watching that, like, we were just like, holy shit, like, this is great what these guys are doing. So always make sure that you know the boundaries of the people that you're playing with and respect those. A big one is giving people time to react. I think this is, like, one of the number one reasons why we run into issues with whether it's like a PvP situation that kind of borders on a KOS because someone didn't give someone else enough time to, like, type and to react, right? Don't rush through things. Take a second to let the other person respond, give them space. I know you might be, like, the adrenaline might be pumping, you might feel like you're trigger happy, but, like, let the situation breathe and work itself out. Okay. This one is, like, honestly one of my big ones. Collaborate, don't control. And and always record. That's a good point. You should always have recording software. Steam now has built-in recording software. It's very sick. It's very lightweight. It does a great job. staff, if we have two people telling me how a situation went down and everything was said over voice, it's incredibly difficult for us to be able to say like, yeah, no, this is or isn't a KOS. Like, that's something that you guys, everyone has to take a little bit of ownership of. If you're getting into a heated situation, or if you know you're going into a situation where you might be, getting into some trouble or getting up to some antics, you should be making sure that at least you or someone in your party, it doesn't even need to be you, you can just be like, hey, is someone recording right now? And that is going to cover your bases, okay? But collaborate, don't control. I see so many people who are dead set on a particular interaction going a particular way. And you have to let that go. You really have to like say like, look, I want to leave this room alive, but maybe I'm not gonna, and like, if it's a compelling story and it's going to move things and kick off a war or do something that's like really exciting, kind of go with the flow. Right. And then obviously just like reading the room, like, pay attention to how people are, how people are reacting to the RP. Sometimes it's good to like just take other people's leads, to look around the room, see how people are reacting and say, okay, maybe this is maybe I'm going to follow this person's lead because I like what they're doing. I think this is going in a cool direction. Things that are not acceptable. Obviously, metagaming, power gaming, and out of character hostility. So I'll just talk about some examples and then we can dive into this because I'm sure people have some things they want to talk about or questions they have. So I'm going to tell you guys right now, if you have a Discord that you and your friends are on and you have a channel called, IC chats, that's not like, you guys can call it IC all day if you want to. If it's not said in the game, it's OOC. We had this, I've seen situations before where someone was like, I was in someone else's Discord, and so I saw this conversation going on, and then I took that information, I acted on it. I'm like, well, would those people have had that conversation around you if they knew you were listening? Like, did you just read it off a chat? Like, I love everyone should, if you guys want to have a Discord for you guys to chat and collab and meme and plan, that's a great idea. Planning is good. No, this does not. No, faxing faxing is a completely different story. And that's something we're going to be updating to be very clear on in the OOC rules. Like, if you're faxing someone, we consider that to be like a fax that comes out of something in your house. You read this piece of paper and that quote unquote happens like in game. But there is no, I don't like, if you guys send us a thing and say, oh, we have this in character chat. No, it's on another Discord. It's not happening in the game. It is 100% out of character. And honestly, like, I'm gonna tell you guys from my own personal experience, I see the majority of issues when it comes to player tensions, whether it's out of character stuff, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff tends to happen in Discords. It's all these people chatting and getting worked up over a situation, talking about it out of character and then taking it in character. And it's not, I think that it leads to like more problems sometimes than good. And so I fully encourage you guys, have your Discords, plan things, talk about when people are going to be online so we can all get on and go to this town and do this looting and blah, 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 blah. But like, there is no IC Discord. It doesn't exist. It's the only IC that we are accepting is what happens on voice in the game through faxes or through the chat. Okay. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Another example is like the whole right-clicking on someone and saying like, oh, I know who this person is, or even doing something like where you use the trade window to figure out who someone is. Not only is it bad etiquette, but it kind of like takes the fun out of the game. Like something I actually really enjoy about the beginning of a new season is like I stay out of and this is just a personal preference for me, but I stay out of the bios. Like, I don't like going into the bios and knowing like, oh, I know who Cheese Dorito is playing, I know who BB's playing, and I know who Ratman's playing, like blah blah blah. Like I personally really enjoy finding all of that stuff out and like just putting on blinders and going into the game and like figuring out who people are. And of course, eventually be like, oh, no way, that's so and so. That is way more. And like, that's just play just from my perspective, a lot more fun to figure out. And I know some people are just going to play the same character. BB's playing BB. And that, you know, there's pros and cons to that. And that's up to you guys. I'm not gonna, you know, like snark on it one way or the other. But the idea is that like, you know, by letting things happen in character and in game, it's a lot more engaging, it's a lot more exciting, it's a lot more fun. Okay. And again, it's back to like, you know, another, like I heard an OCC conversation about an event, so I rush over to interfere before it happens. And this includes like, this is like metagaming is like when someone is being robbed and you jump on your Discord and you say, help, I'm being robbed. Like, that's just like, I totally understand why you want to do that. I've done that in the past. And, it's just, it does like take the wind out of the room. So I would say act on information that your character has learned through in-game interactions or mechanics. Okay. So hold on, I'm just gonna take a pause here before we get to power gaming examples. Okay, season 11 question. Is it still going to be called facts? Yeah, we're still going to call it facts. We're not going to change that just because it is like a very legacy term and we don't want to confuse people. Oh, sorry. Thanks. I want something about not trapping someone with non-value of life in terms of etiquette or rules, because this season was a situation where I got held up, ended up being told to run or die. I ran and they used it as a reason to shoot me. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that is kind of like, and we will touch on, there is a section, like it's literally the next section here we're going to chat on, which is NVL and just the new life rule in general. So maybe I can expand on that a little bit in a second, if that's cool. Yeah, no, I'd love to talk about appropriate use of alt characters. Absolutely. Because I think this has been a... I am going to, okay, I'm going to be real with you guys. I saw a shit ton of people this season not understanding how to properly use alts and essentially abusing alts. So to take a step back and try and set the record straight, everyone has the ability to use two accounts. You got your main and you got your alt, right? If you're using your main and you want to go rob someone, well, then you can put on a disguise. You're allowed one disguise, and it has to be kind of the same disguise, and you can go do your robbery like that, okay? The purpose of having an alt account is so that you can play a different character. So you can say like, hey, I'm kind of bored of this person or blah, blah, blah. I want to create an alt and play as a totally different character. You got to like, let me frame it for you like this. You can't take your main account and then just change your name and say, oh, this is an alt account. This is an alt character. It's like, well, hold on. Show me your stats. Like you've got level 10 aiming. You got level 6 nimble. You have 10,000 kills. Like you are literally that character, those kills, those skills, that is all part of their learned experience. That is part of the character themselves. You don't get to just take that character and use it as an alt and call it an alt. And if you see someone who's breaking that rule, you let us know and we'll talk to that player and we'll deal with it. But if you want to play, and yeah, we'll get people up to the podium in a second. But if you want to play as like if you want to use your alt for an antagonist, that's fine. You're more than welcome to do that. But you have to level that character up, just like you do. Yeah, exactly. I think what Avi said here is perfect. Is like, you know, your main can be an antagonistic character, and if you don't want to play as an evil character, you play as an alt, right? Or vice versa, whatever makes sense. But the whole purpose of having an alt is to give players the ability to do 2 different characters. What they shouldn't be doing is doing an RP name to something like, think about it in real life. Are you putting on a disguise or are you a totally different person? Because if you're a totally different person, well, I mean, okay, so I'll address what you just said in a second, Alice. And like, yeah, so if you are changing your RP name to be a totally different person with your main account, that's not acceptable. If you want to have an alt account, and as long as it's a completely different character who has 0 crossover with your other character, so like you're not allowed to share safe zones. You're not allowed to have a second safe zone. You're not allowed to you're not allowed to with your main account go put a bag of gear and fill it up with a bunch of really good armor and then go throw it out in the woods, log off, log in as your new character or your alt character, and then go get that bag. If we catch you doing that, you're going to be pulled into a ticket. Full stop. If you guys see someone doing that, let us know and we will pull them into a ticket, because it is basically an abuse of the intention of alt accounts. Okay, so before I know Nickname wants to speak in a second, which I want to make sure that I answered Alice's question well and to her satisfaction. And maybe just to finish off, like, it's not okay for them to go and provoke, because they should have no interaction with their main character. So if your question is, hey, can someone use their alt account to come and then walk into Alice's bar and shoot me in the face? No, because they don't have any interaction with the main character. You can't use your alt as like, oh, this is my other buddy who lives in my house and we talk and we know, yes, exactly. They should be living 2 different lives and have 0 motivations that are shared. And if you see someone who's not following those rules, we will be more than happy to pull them aside and make sure that they're aware of the rules. Yeah. So like an alias is essentially so to Kodad's point, an alias is, imagine you putting a bandana on your face and changing your voice, right? That's an alias. It's like, I am pretending to be Bruce Wayne is you, Batman is your alias. I hope that's a quick way of delineating between the two. I'm going to invite Nickname to the stage to ask a question.
Okay, so I have one question. We're getting into characters. So if your character gets CK'd, I'm confused about if you're allowed to take the stat block from the previous character. Because I've asked before to players, and I've gotten different answers to that question.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question too. So, it kind of depends. Okay, so if you had unlimited accounts, like if you could make 5 alts, then we would probably have a really hard rule about like, no, if your character gets CK'd, you have to start from scratch, blah, 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 blah. I think because it's a game and we're here to have fun and do all these other things, if your character does get CK'd and you bring in a new character to replace them and they are your main character, then I don't think it's unfair for the expectation. For example, let's say you have only one account. You have a main character with level 7 everything, and they get CK'd. I do not, and I don't think anyone on the staff expects you to, now you have to go use an alt. Okay? You've killed that character. If you want to wear that skin, that's fine. That's something that I don't think that we're super interested in nitpicking. Again, as long as it's being done in good faith. And I think part of that too is because CKing a character, killing off a character, is really in good faith of like moving a story along, of doing good RP, of making something a bit more compelling from a storytelling perspective, right? And so if you're doing that, then we're going to have a little bit more wiggle room about like, yeah, okay, kill that person off and, you know, load up and restore your skills and just get back to playing, you know. I think that's fair. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Also, what should you like? I'm confused on your safe zone. Once you die, should you immediately drop that?
What do you mean? Like if it's a
your
CK?
your character dies. Yeah, if it's a CK, your character dies. It's a CK. Do you immediately drop your safe zone? Okay.
No, I don't think that's something that you should necessarily have to do. I think like ideally, in a perfect world, I think my like, let me put it this way. It's going to be really sus. Like, people know where you live, right? Like, people are like, oh, I always see so-and-so living in that house. And then if some random person shows up and now they live there, then it just looks weird, right? You really do need to plan that into your CKs. And if you are going to be killing your character off, I don't expect you to drop your safe zone and let everyone loot it. I think my expectation would be like, hey, maybe move. Like, maybe just move out of that safe zone and find a new place to live, whether it's in a new part of the map or whether it's building another house down the road. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I try. That's what I have done. I take some stuff, leave some stuff, so it's at least
I think
lootable.
that's the best way to do it. Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, cool. No problem. Appreciate it. Let me see here. Some people metagame though, so I do. Metagaming is always going to happen. Just like you're always going to have random people joining the server and KOSing, and then we have to deal with that. It happens. What we try to do as staff is to minimize it as much as possible. And so, again, if you have a situation where you have someone sort of dead to rights on doing that, you're like, look, man, I see the situation. This happened. This person's doing this. Like, help me out here, and we can go and we can have a conversation with that player. And again, too, I want everyone to know that, like, we as a staff team, like, tickets and pulling people into tickets, it's not about getting people in trouble. It's not about dressing people down. It's not about yelling or being punitive. That's like, at the end of the day, like, we don't want to be punitive at all, right? It's about educating, having a constructive conversation, coming to a common understanding of why something is or isn't appropriate, okay? And then moving on. So hopefully that helps you guys out. Got a good one to add with the RP etiquette conversation. Voice chat RP, responding to text chat, giving text RPers. Yeah, 100%. I mean, that kind of goes back to what I was saying about just RP etiquette and giving people time to react. Some people are slow at typing. I tend to be very fast, but I make lots of mistakes. And so know how to read the room and just give people an opportunity to respond versus, like, I understand, like, I'll give an example of like what Avi touched on a little bit earlier, which was like, hey, someone held me at gunpoint and then told me to run. And then I started running and then they shot me dead. That whole situation really came out of the other people not giving Avi enough time to react to that situation, because they just started counting down and it's like, whoa, wait, what? Like, this is a countdown? Like, you need to give people, you can't just say 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like, that's like, we're not going to accept that. And if we see that happens and we have video evidence of it, we are going to push back on people and say, like, meow, like, you can't do that. So nice try though. All right. Okay. So, I mean, I'll touch on power gaming just very briefly as well. I mean, we all talk about, I think everyone knows what power gaming is here. There shouldn't be a lot of confusion as to what is and isn't acceptable, but we'll still, like, using broken crafting recipes to generate infinite materials, duplicating generators, destroying walls to get into places that you shouldn't be doing, building fire pits to exploit Zeds, pushing cars out of safe zones. I really don't think we need to do a ton of talking about this. I think, from everyone that I see on this call, there's a lot of experienced parpers here who know what is and isn't acceptable. And the reason, if anyone's like, part of the reason why we, just take a step back, like if there is a rule and you know, you might look at a rule and be like, that rule seems stupid or arbitrary, or I can't understand the reason behind the rule, doesn't mean that there isn't a really good reason for it, right? And so sometimes it's incumbent on us as staff to do a better job of explaining why some of these rules are in place. So, you know, the reason why we push back on power gaming and exploits is because not everyone knows about the exploits in Zomboid. Like, not everyone knows all of the tricks. And what we are trying to do is we're trying to provide a fair game for everybody. And so people who know how to power game have an unfair advantage. If you know, like, you know, one I'll give you an example. When I first became staff in, I think it was season 9, I was watching someone way out near the Cyberdrive compound. They live not far from there. And I watched them. They were just standing in front of a window and they just kept hitting it, or they were, I can't remember exactly, but they just kept doing this action. I'm like, what the hell is this? And I even messaged staff. I'm like, I've been watching this person and they've been standing in front of a window for 20 minutes, like hitting it with their like shotgun in melee mode. Like, what are they doing? And they're like, oh, they're power gaming right now. Like, they're trying to level something up and yada, yada, yada. That person is literally just getting an unfair advantage to people who are actually doing it through the normal channels. Okay. The normal mechanisms is what I should say. To speak to what Avi is saying, would using a house's front gate to kill zombies through it safely be power gaming? So what I will say is it depends. Okay. If I'm invisible and I see you at the front of your house clearing some zombies from your front gate because they've all accumulated there, like, I don't expect you to open the gate and let, 20 zombies into your home. I don't think that's reasonable, right? I think it's reasonable for you to clear the gate and then exit the gate and go clear the area around your home. Where it becomes power gaming is when I see players shouting and drawing all the zombies in the area and then running back to their gate, closing the gate and hiding behind it and shooting them. It's that repetitive action of doing it once or 2 or 3 times that really becomes power gaming. So, yeah. So, I think it really just comes down to the specific circumstances, right? Yeah, and I mean we'll touch on NVL in a second, and then I would love to hear what people have to say about their experiences, because there's obviously the new life rule, which I haven't really gotten into here, but if anyone is not familiar with the new life rule, it's there in order to not just maintain the immersion, so that if you light someone up with a bunch of bullets and then they come back 5 minutes later, it's like, wait, dude, I just emptied a clip into your chest. Like, how are you here standing and fully back to your stats? Like, there's a really good reason why that rule is in place. I understand. And I cannot tell you how many times I've been there where I've been in, whether it's PvP or something's happened to me and I've dropped some cherry gear and I just get sweaty and I'm like, oh, I just lost all my stuff. I lost all my stuff. And you just want to run back and get your shit back. I totally appreciate that feeling and that sentiment, but it does not give us license to just part of the thing is, man, I remember there was one season, I think it was season 7, Camden, where we were there were some just people just running around and they were literally just doing they were doing a UE all through Ingalls. They were just driving, going back, driving, finding a person, and they were just robbing every single fucking person that they saw, right? Oh shit! Sorry, I got distracted by the chat. Now I forgot where I was going with that point. And it became a really punishing situation. But what it did was it made me as a player, I knew that like I had to be really careful what I carried in my backpack when I ran from Suggs to Ingalls. It was a long run on foot. And I knew like, man, if these guys catch me, like I am going to get robbed. So maybe I won't have my Zoidberg chest rig and my Hayes backpack on me all the time when I'm going from place to place. Like part of like Alice knows what I'm talking about. Like having that fear is important. It actually to me makes things more fun having a little bit of fear. And yes, those interactions can sometimes suck, and it can sometimes suck to lose all your stuff. But what I like, that's one of the reasons, guys, why like don't wear your cherry gear everywhere you go. You should be wearing your full tactical gear when you know you're going into a situation, or be ready to defend yourself. Like, don't go anywhere and not have a gun on you and be ready to respond in kind with like a clip to the chest. Like that's kind of how it works. So, yeah, I think it's important to remember that like you should value your life, you should value your stuff, and yeah, sometimes you lose your best stuff, and that's part of how you learn. That's like it's a tough lesson to learn, but it's a good lesson, and it teaches us a lot about just being better players. So, with that in mind, I'm going to talk a little bit about non-value of life, and I'll let you guys keep chatting, and then we'll address things as they come up. Just to be respectful of people's time, like we're about 2 hours deep. I think we'll plan on trying to, finish some of these topics, leave some room for discussion, see where things go, and probably wrap it up in the next hour, just depending on how much stuff there is to talk about. But yeah, anyway, we'll see how this goes, but I just want to make sure we're moving along and addressing all the things that need to be addressed today. So let's talk a little bit about non-value of life and why this is important. So you really do need to treat your character's life as valuable. And we see this a lot where people like, okay, I'll take a step back. One of the reasons why we had skill loss and why we introduced skill loss with the restore pods was because we noticed players just weren't valuing their lives. People were behaving in a way or running into situations or doing dumb shit, dying, just getting 100% of their skills back, and then going back out in the world. And we're like, man, like these players don't seem to give a shit about their lives, and they're acting like they're these invincible, juggernauts. So we have to put something in. We have to put a mechanism in to force them to value their lives. So that's when we put in the pod system. That's when we started giving people a 10% ding every time they died. We had a really good spirited discussion on that. And, we essentially listened to our players and went to 100% again, because people are like, yo, this is an RP game. I don't have time to grind all these skills back, And it was a good conversation. And like, I think, just based off of the sentiment, we're like, listen, we're going to listen to what our players want here. We actually don't agree with you guys. We think that there should be a punishment for when you die. We would like to put a 10% deduction on your skills every time you die. But the community loudly and resoundingly rejected that. They didn't want it. And sometimes we, I want people to have some confidence that like we listen to you guys even though we don't want to do something. Like even if we think, this is a stupid thing and like blah, 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 but listen, we're going to listen to them because it's not about making noise or being a squeaky wheel. It's about just like, respecting the sentiment of the players. If that sentiment ever shifts and everyone's like, bring back this, then that's a different conversation. But anyway, it's really important in order for the RP to have some kind of value is that you don't just treat your character like this invincible, unstoppable juggernaut, and that you are actually valuing your player's life, right? So things like running into a zombie horde with no plan, pulling a gun on 4 armed bandits, or having nothing but a crowbar in this example, right? Like it's out of context with how a real person would behave. And I know that we have to meet this really fine line between realism and fun, and keeping in mind that it's just a game, but it's also an RP game. It's difficult to do sometimes. Clem, I'll let you speak in just a sec. Just bear with me here. So, in order to play this correctly, you should react realistically to danger. Whether it's fear, negotiation, like if people are holding you up, that's a really great time to be like, look, I don't want any trouble. Do you want my stuff? Like, what do I got to do to get out of this? Like, try and negotiate your way, surrender when you're outmatched. If you have a crew of people around you, maybe not a good time to pull your gun and just get gunned down and then open a ticket later and be like, I lost all my stuff. It's like, well, you pulled a gun on 6 armed people. Like, of course you're going to get shot. So sorry. But anyway, and also considering the long-term consequences of stuff, right? Is how to actually make sure that things, like, and we're all here. Like, every single one of you is a storyteller. And you guys all have a story that you want to tell. But I think you also all recognize that there is a larger shared story for us to tell together. And to do that, we need to cooperate, right? We need to share space. We need to follow rules. There's just like, there's all these little things that we need to do in order for that to happen. And so by having respect for the non-value of life rule, or valuing your life really, you're contributing to a better RP environment. You're making the stakes higher. You're having, more excitement and fun. So with all that being said, I'm gonna give Clem a moment to speak because he's put his hand up. Clem, the floor is yours.
Is there a way that the staff can meet the players halfway? So that instead of all the stats losing 10% or 40, if you read it directly from your person, it was 10% from the pot, 40% from the file that you get when you respawn. Is there a way that only certain stats get that penalty, like aiming, the combat stats?
Yes.
And yeah.
Yes, the short answer is yes. We have full control over what percentage of stats get restored. And we did that in the past. There, like when people did go down, for example, I can't remember the specifics, so please forgive me for not knowing exactly what it was, but there were certain gains that, for example, I think Nickname is addressing this right now, aiming and nimble and things like that we would let people keep. And so yes, there is room for us to adjust that. And we're always looking at that. So, are we going to reintroduce skill restore? Really, we're paying attention to what the community needs, right? And what actually drives RP in the right direction, what makes people value their lives without making it more punishing. We're constantly looking at that and looking for opportunities to make it more engaging and more fair. We want you guys to have fun. We want people to enjoy themselves, but we also want people to follow the rules. And so we're always trying to, change the mixer just a tiny little bit here and a little bit there to try and get people to find that right balance. And sometimes it takes us time. It takes us time. It takes us experimenting and seeing does this work? Does that work? And, just kind of go from there. So I hope does that answer your question, Clem?
Yes.
Okay, sick. Thanks, buddy. Let me see. Sorry, I gotta go all the way back here. Let me see if there's any more questions here or anything related to what we're talking about. But anyway, yeah. So like I said, we're constantly looking at ways of incentivizing or de-incentivizing certain behaviors. We will always be open to making changes, and that's about as much as I can say about that. I will invite Logicon to speak for a sec.
Hi. Did you guys on staff note, because you were mentioning that people would just run in and die all the time if they had no consequence. Did you guys notice once you've made the shift to 100% if that increased at all, or if it stayed the same? Because personally, as a player, I felt once the shift happened, I didn't see people being more reckless. But obviously, I'm just a player. I don't have like the oversight that the staff does.
Yeah, and so that's a great question. I think that the real challenge is, like I said, we only can see so much, right? There's only so many places that our eyes can be at once, and being able to get like a read on that is actually very difficult, right? Because then we have to literally be like spending our time just invisible and like watching people and seeing like, oh, does this person come back, or what does this do, or blah 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 blah. What I think that we saw from that adjustment is that a lot of players that were struggling with like, hey man, I have limited time to play this game. I'm getting super frustrated with losing my stats all the time. It's making me play it, like put down the game more frequently, right? I think we did see a little bit more retention of those particular people who voiced those concerns, right? And I think like and again, this is fairly anecdotal, but I think it's safe to say that we saw like a net positive from that, right? As we noticed like, okay, people seem to be digging this change. No one's complaining that they're not getting their stats like debuffed. So, it is what it is, right?
Because I don't know. Yeah, that's all I want to say. I won't put my 2 cents in it. Just wanted to ask.
No,
Thank you.
I mean, I'm curious to hear like if you have 2 cents.
I mean, personally, I enjoyed the change a lot. I think, I understand like some players want the combat stats, but a lot of the complaints I remember hearing from people in season 9 was that they had level 10 in combat, and then they were almost at level 8 when they died, and getting to 9 to 10 takes a really, really long time, and then you might die in between that, and then all of a sudden your 9 goes to 8, and it's like a cycle that happens with combat stats. And it's like I understand, like, I want that that halfway mark, but like it's personally, I enjoyed the 100%. So it's tricky either way.
100%. And I'll give you an example of things that we looked at, because we got all kinds of suggestions. And so, when you are running a server the size of ours, right? We have X number of staff members, and we have X number of staff members who have particular skills. Okay, and so for example, we can come up with all of these solutions, but really it comes down to a very limited number of people who have the ability to technically implement those solutions, right? And so are we going to ask Crab to recode his restore mod to like and put all of this effort? Like one of the suggestions was, hey, ding us for our skills. Like when we like of course, like hit us and yeah, sure, take some away, but give us the ability to pay like $5,000 to get 100%. Like that stuff just became too technically difficult to implement, or it's like, this is becoming complicated and a pain in the ass. Like we're not like, it's the simplest solution is almost always the best solution, right? So coming up with these convoluted ways of, well, if this, then that, and if that, then this, it isn't probably going to meet the mark, especially with having like limited resources. If we had like a whole team of developers who could, code up a mod and do this, then we'd be having a much different conversation, right? But we don't have those resources. We have limited resources, though the resources that we have are like incredible. The people who work behind the scenes, like something that I think I hope over time, and one of the reasons why I like having these workshops with you guys is I think it's easy to not see how much work like goes into things that you'll never see. You will never even notice that so-and-so spent 5 or 6 hours on something in the back end to fix this thing, because it's just not something that's like super visible, right? But I think that we're always trying to focus on finding that balance, right? It's like, what do we have time to do? what is the most effective and what makes sense for folks. Okay.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Yeah, it did. Thank you so much.
All right, cool. No, I appreciate that. I'm just going through some of the comments in the chat real quick. And yes, we all do love Crab, and I will encourage you guys, you know, if you're in a position to do so, you know, when he does do an update, show him some love, just emote and say, you know, like share your appreciation. If you guys have the ability to buy him a coffee through Ko-Fi, I encourage you to do so. I think it just goes without saying that Crab does a lot of stuff that just people don't see, and it makes this community like a better place to be. So, you know, like I think we're all incredibly appreciative of what he's doing. He fucking rules. He's the GOAT. Anyway, getting back into the topic at hand. So we've talked a little bit about non-value of life. We've talked about you know, sort of just the new life rule, which is really important. I don't think we need to spend too much more time on this unless anyone else has any comments or any suggestions or stuff that they would love to, you know, or something they'd like to see implemented. I'll give people in chat just a minute and then we'll start moving on. Okay. All right. We are going to move on. We're going to talk a little bit about Robbery RP because I think something that like I will like, you know, I touched on this a little bit earlier. You know, back in season 7, I was consistently terrified of being robbed because there were like groups of people who were doing bandit RP. They were doing it well. They weren't like some people were going a little bit overboard, which is why we actually had to add a bunch of convoluted rules. Those of you guys who have been around long enough know that we have grossly simplified the robbery rules. We used to have rules where it's like you can rob someone, but you can only take 1 or 2 items from them. You could take their bag and a piece of gear, or you could take their bag and a gun, but you had to leave everything else. And that is A, difficult to police, and B, it's kind of like convoluted for people. We should just, you know, have the ability for people if they want to like to rob you. And in season 7, robbery was a real thing. Like you had to actually worry about it. And I saw virtually no robbery RP this season. I'm not saying it didn't happen. There were definitely a couple of situations where people got stuck up and then, you know, asked to, you know, turn in their gear. But it was extremely rare. And so something that I'm hoping that we see more of in the next season is people who do want to use robbery as a mechanic to make things interesting. Now, so we'll just talk about this really quickly. So robbery really needs to be something that is driven by the story, you know, like, I think it's much better for you to have a character that it makes sense for why they're going around and robbing people, other than you've got cool shit on your back and I want that stuff, right? I mean, that can be part of the reason, but there should be a bigger reason for it, right? So whether it's, you know, hunger, depression, revenge, or control, right? You might say, don't come into this part of town. Like that's actually a really compelling thing to say is like, hey, this part of town's controlled by, you know, the powder keggers. And if you walk into here, you can expect to be robbed by us because we run this area and we are putting our foot down and telling people like, you know, if you walk into our area and you don't pay the toll, well, you're going to pay the toll. And another thing is like robbery really should be anchored in good RP. It should be interesting. It shouldn't just be about you saying, hey, stick your hands up and let me see your stuff. You know, having a little bit of a fun, interesting interaction behind that, something of value for the other player who you are robbing. Because again, we're trying to have fun here. We're trying to play a game. We're not trying to punish people or make their lives miserable. We all know what it's like to lose really, really good stuff. everyone on this call can probably empathize with like, oh man, I'd hate to be robbed at this particular moment when I was carrying these particular items. And so we should have a little bit of like care and compassion for people who are on the other end of that stick. So at the very least, you can make it a fun, exciting interaction, right, with them. Make it interesting. Have an interesting character. Rob them with a cool voice and a cool gimmick or something, right? And try and end it with unnecessary, like without unnecessary violence. Like just killing someone. Like it's one thing if you stick someone up and they try to run and then you're like, well, you tried to run, so like I wasn't going to shoot you, but now I am. That's a little bit of a different story than just like going up to someone and being like, I like your shoes. And then when they don't take them off too quickly, you just shoot them in the face. That sucks. That's not fun for anyone. And that to me isn't in like good faith, right? Of sort of the rules around robbery. So, you know, if you're going to conduct a good robbery, you want to set the scene. You know, you want to use dialogue, you want to use emotes, you want to create like tension, you want to, you know, it's kind of like, I don't know, like I'm just thinking of example, like a really tense, it's not even robbery, but like that scene in No Country for Old Men when Anton Chigurh goes in and flips the coin with the guy at the gas station, you know, like that's an intense fucking scene. Like there's a lot going on there and you're really worried about what's going to happen. Like that is exciting. Like that is cool RP. And that's a neat way that you could go out in the world and say like, hey, I want you to pick a number between 1 and 10 and it's going to determine how you walk out of here, right? Or doing something. Also be willing to negotiate. You know, maybe they don't have the stuff you want. Maybe you can be like, so what's in your bag? Tell me what you do have. Like, if you don't have what I want, what do you have that's going to make me let you go? Maybe you can tell them like, hey, like, I don't have anything, but I'll tell you something who has some cool stuff. You should go rob them instead. You know, like that's a cool and like exciting and compelling robbery interaction. And it's all about the RP. That's why what do we got? Like 38 people here. That's why you're all here. You're all RPers. Like the people who mechanically play Zomboid and just loot and go out, they're not in this room right now. The people who are in this room right now are people who are like, I love the story. I love the interactions. And that's something that we as players and like, you know, we all have a responsibility to lead by example and show people why it's cool or why it's exciting or why it's compelling. So don't be afraid to set an example for people and do it the right way and then encourage more of that type of behavior. Okay. Does anyone, I know robbery can be a bit of a tricky, it can be tricky. There can be a lot of idiosyncrasies around it. I'd be very curious to see if anyone has any questions or comments or anything that they would like to bring up specifically revolving around Robbery RP. Okay, I'll invite, oh my God, I love seeing that. Honestly, it's an honor to invite the next person to the stage. Brody, please.
Oh, I was fucking muted. Oh.
Not anymore.
Hello?
What's up, dude?
That's so sweet of you to say, man. I said in the chat, but I was gonna say, so if you're gonna go out to rob someone and you're gonna make it a good experience, don't take any of your important gear, because that kind of incentivizes you to, like, you know, go quickly, get it done, get out of there because you don't want to lose your stuff. Just bring some old crap, you know? If you got an old gun knocking around that you don't really use and you've got ammo for it that you just need to get rid of, bring that along. Bring along stuff that you can afford to use because it doesn't really matter if you go out there, do something silly and die. You made a good story, you know?
Honestly, incredible advice. And thank you for that, because it really is about making a cool interaction, making some fun for the person who's participating. And part of that is going into the fight, maybe having some stuff you don't care about losing. So when one thing I always suggest to people is if you're going to rob somebody, have a completely different kit. Don't wear your Prime Spec Ops gear. Don't have your haze bag. Go out in a police vest an Alice pack, bring an M14 with you, and have some fun with it. Like, yes, okay, maybe you won't win against someone who has an M4A1, but that's kind of fun. Like, so yeah, that's incredible
Exactly.
advice. Thank you, Brody.
Hell yeah. See you later, man.
Yeah, great to see you. I'm going to invite Nickname up to say something here. All right. Welcome to the forum.
Okay, so I want to know the best way to do, because the thing that turned me off from Robbery RP a lot on is the concept that it's hard to get like say you've never robbed someone,
right?
But you want to be like shakily holds the gun, and you don't want the other person just like while you're typing that or doing something immediately shoot you. That's what I was always scared of.
Yes.
Because that's no fun. I just want to do like RP and a lot of / me's to start the RP.
Right.
I don't know how to do that. So how would you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, great question. And it really is about the like. Okay, so it's safe to say that people who use voice versus text chat in very specific circumstances are at a disadvantage, right? I believe that sometimes voice is a little bit too easy because you can just like say whatever's on your mind and you can spit really quick. Typing forces you to think about what you're going to say and what you're going to do. And so if you're going out and you're doing Robbery RP and you don't want to use your voice, like the answer that I'm going to have is maybe not like the best answer, but it's unfortunately rolling with the punches. And that is part of something that you have to sort of, when you're going out and you're doing Robbery RP and you are texting it, right? You kind of have to you just have to go with the flow on that one. And I know it's not ideal, but it is just really the best that you can do is just say like, me / like holds the gun towards you. One thing that I always suggest. So I'll give you guys a hot tip. Okay. When you're robbing someone and you are doing text-based robbery, one thing that you can do is if you like, for example, you can have a notepad open behind the game, or if you have two screens, have it over in your second display and have some and pre-type some commands, right? And so I'll give you an example. When I rob somebody, and I learned this from the greats, from getting robbed by people like Nacho and some other folks in the past. When you rob someone, the first thing that you tell them is just says, "Hey, I want to see that gun on the ground, and I want you to drop your radio." Because when you tell someone to put their radio down, guess what? They can't call for help, can they? Right? So it's like, hey, gun on the ground, radio on the ground, and hands in the air. And you can literally have that copied and pasted and just go boom. And then if someone, and it just makes it, then at least you're like, okay, I've disarmed this person. And then you can have a second like line of text that says, all right, I'm going to search you. If you move, I will shoot you. Right? And then you can walk up to them with your gun drawn. You can search them. You can make sure they don't have any stuff on them. Right? And you can, through RP, like basically like navigate that interaction without having to worry about them just waiting for, because I get what you're saying. Like you're basically saying, man, while I'm typing, the person could just draw a gun and shoot me in the face. Right? And so the best advice I can give is to have some commands pre-typed and make sure that it involves them dropping their weapons, right? Because that's going to be a lot easier to facilitate that. Does that make sense, bud?
Yeah, I guess that goes for the same for you go up to search someone and they pull out the gun. You just got to roll with that, and they shoot you.
100%. And unfortunately,
right,
it's just it's one of the limitations, but it can lead to some fun stuff, right?
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
No worries. And yeah, so just to build on this a little bit, like an example of good robbery RP. Running up to someone demanding items with no buildup kind of sucks. You know, having something where you step out of the shadows and you do like a slash me, like you can hide in the shadows, wait for someone to go by, and have that command keyed up. Another thing that I've done in the past is, you know how when you have the chat window open, if you hit the arrow key up, it will bring up the last thing that you said or the last command. Sometimes I'll queue those up. So I'll type the two things that I want to say, and I'll hit enter away from anyone so they don't see like the text, and then I'll run up to someone and go like arrow up, enter, arrow up, enter. And it lets me do two text actions very quickly without having to do a lot of like context switching. So that can be an advantage as well. All right. Obviously also be a good RP victim, or a good robbery victim. So if you want to be on the other end of it, react with realism, like be fearful, right? Don't maybe instantly fight back, especially if you're outnumbered. Make sure that you value your life and that you value getting out of the situation alive, and use it as a situation to, you know, really focus on character development or story development or whatever arcs that you have going back and forth. Okay. We have some final, just like super simple final takeaways, and then I'm going to open the floor to some additional discussion or some additional topics. If there's anything you guys want to like, add to or expunge on or expand on, I should say, we can. But just like I said before, it's a shared experience. We're here to tell cool stories, like as a group of people. We are all actors on a stage, and the story is the play. It's not about just telling my story. I am an actor in this chorus of people, and it's my job to let other people react accordingly and be a part of that play. You know, making sure that your character is not invincible, having some realism. Like I'll give you an example. In season 9, I played this hacker character named Io. And very often people would be like, hey man, we're going to Louisville. Like we're going to go do some looting. And whenever it was nighttime, like I would be like, no, like I'm not going to Louisville at night. You're fucking crazy. Like I can't see. I don't want to lose my shit. Like I'm too scared to go out there. And like, that was something I baked into my character to actually have like a sense of fear given certain circumstances. So obviously, you know, so conflict should be engaging, not toxic. And like, look, I can appreciate how sometimes it's very difficult to keep those two worlds separate. What I'm going to say about this, guys, is it's not easy, but like good stuff isn't easy. It's not easy to write a hit song. It's not easy to paint a beautiful painting. It's not easy to write a really nice story. It takes effort. And sometimes it takes effort on your part to really separate out those two worlds, if you will, as much as possible. If you feel something is getting toxic, if you feel like there's something that where like you're feeling harassed or, you know, unfairly punished for something, or something is like really rubbing you the wrong way, cut a ticket, talk to us, let us try to help you untangle it, and we'll do our best. Obviously talked about robbery. And think about it as an event, not just a gameplay tactic. I think when you look at it that way, it really goes back to what I was talking about doing things in good faith, right? In like, I'm trying to make this fun. Yes, I want that person's Zoidberg rig that they're wearing, but I also want them to leave with a little bit of an excitement and their heart racing a little bit. And then obviously we're talking about valuing your player's life. This is a cornerstone of good RP. When you value your player's life, it informs your decisions. It helps you understand a little bit better about, like, how would I react to this? Am I gonna take on this group of people? Am I just gonna run into the woods and try and make a break for it? There's just like a whole an example. I hope they don't mind me picking on them for this, but I remember this season, Francis got held up by the cult. By like Moon and Zero and those guys. They were going around like kidnapping people. And Francis made the decision. It's like, all right, I got these 3 armed people. I'm gonna make a run for it. I'm just gonna run into the woods. They ran. They ended up getting shot and killed. And then Francis CK'd that character, and it ended up being like a bit of a big deal, and like it drove like one of my character's arcs in a particular direction. It became this big, like it sucked. It was a very sad and I was like, oh man, Francis is dead. Like I'm so sad right now. Like it can make things interesting. So try and make like these things. Think about it as an event, as something that you're doing for the benefit of the player base, not always necessarily something that's just for you. Because because like this is something I see sometimes. People have these like super like self-centered ways of engaging in storytelling because they're like, I want A to happen. And if you try and force that, A, you probably won't be successful, and B, it's going to feel like forced and inorganic. And the best stories, I think a lot of people on this call, especially you guys who are veterans, you will agree with me that some of the best RP that you've probably ever had was not planned. It was when something went completely sideways. Like we had a plan to run into this part of town and loot this thing. And then all of a sudden, all hell broke loose. We all had to run for our lives, and we all had to figure out like that's where the fun is. So that's what I'll say about that. I need to just step away from my computer for 30 seconds, but I'd like to give you guys an opportunity to, in the side chat, if you guys have any additional things, like we'll spend a little bit more time talking, but if you guys have any like other, like, hey, I need help with this, or I have a question about that, I'm going to get you guys to punch that in the side chat, and I'll be back in 30 seconds.
Why am I still up here? Okay, I'm gonna go down.
All right, I am back. Okay, so when a new season happens, I'm playing a character from the previous season. You forget everything. Yes, so you do absolutely, like the way that I always frame seasons is it's like being in a multiverse. You know, you might exist in another universe, but you can't talk to each other. You can't share memories. You have no access to that person's experiences or anything like that. So yeah, that's the best way I find to run a character. Also, yeah, and like if I can give folks a piece of advice, and this is just from my learned experience from playing this on the server for quite some time, is get out of your comfort zone. Like one of the things that can lead to kind of like stale RP is when you keep doing the same thing every season. Because like if I see like a particular character, and it's like it's almost impossible to do, but like, you go in the world, you see so and so, and they're on the radio saying like, hey, it's me, blah 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 blah. You kind of instantly know who that person is. You've played with them before. You kind of know what their character's like, their motivations. Like it's really easy to just like kind of snap back into old habits, right? And I really suggest getting out of those old habits. And another thing that I would challenge you guys to do, and I know a lot of you have exciting plans for your characters for season 11. I love the excitement that I'm seeing from people like gets us really excited as staff to continue to like build out this cool world that we're coming up with. But I always say, like, you should try and play with different people. Get out of your like just doing the same group over and over and over again. It's just, it becomes very like complacent, and you kind of just get into a vibe of just doing the same thing over and over again. By starting from scratch, going out into the world, finding new people to group up with who actually align with your character's motivations, rather than just playing with the same pals every season. That's where the money is. That's where the exciting stuff is. And I can almost guarantee you will have a much more exciting time with your character, developing them, learning them over time, and it forces you to interact with more people and just to have more interesting stories to tell. So if you're looking for a challenge, ditch your old character, come up with something new, and get out of your comfort zone and play with new people. Okay. Another thing, okay, maybe a quick, I don't know how many of you people were in the first RP workshop. If you weren't here, I will quickly go through, because I basically have our old or like our previous like character development notes and stuff. So we came up with some cool stuff around just like, hey, like, you know, here's how to develop a cool backstory. Here's how to think about motivations. Here's things to think about quirks. I've always thought that like your character really just needs a gimmick. And a gimmick might be the wrong word, but like when you start from a small idea and you're like, this is my character and this is my motivation, and it's very simple, you're going to have a lot more fun discovering that character and coming up with their story, versus like, my character is, you know, John Smith, and he's going to do this, and then he's going to do that, and then he's going to have this experience, and then this is going to happen, and this arc is going to go, and like that stuff is like, you can do that. I'm not knocking it, but I'm telling you, it will not be as compelling as if you just go with the flow. Jump into the river and see where the stream takes you, and you're always going to have a lot more fun, and you're going to tell more compelling stories. I like in this document, we have things like motivators, thinking about consistent behavior, like having consistency in your character, you know, so that people can actually get to know you as like a person and say like, oh, this person behaves, you know, the same in different situations, and blah, 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 blah. You know, we talk a little about using tools for character lore, engagement and collaboration, you know, how to have a responsive interaction based off of what is actually happening in front of you, rather than, you know, just like doing what you're trying to do. Things like immersion, conflict resolution, respect and boundaries, which is some stuff that we've already talked about. But there's kind of like a bit more here in terms of just like thinking about your character and how to develop them. I will keep this all in the end of the document, and you guys are more than welcome to rip through that and glean anything that you can for your season 11 characters. And if that's something that helps you out, great. We are starting to approach the 3-hour mark, and I want to be respectful of people's time. So what I think we can do is maybe open it up to a couple of just a round table of questions. And once we field a couple of those, what I'm going to say that we'll do is we'll wrap today's, you know, sort of RP workshop session. If this is something that you guys liked and you enjoyed, we will be having more of them. It's something that we want to continue to open up, especially with season 11 around the corner. We typically like to have these right before the season starts, just so we can get, you know, get people's like creative ideas flowing and help, you know, help people get to where they want to be. So with that all being said, does anyone, yeah, I'll be posting the links to this document. I'll probably be posting this whole talk just to a YouTube so that everyone can get to it. So if you guys missed anything or you want to go back, we're going to have all of this content posted for everyone. So that being said, does anyone have any questions or follow-up items or stuff that they would like further clarified or things that they'd like to see maybe in a future RP workshop? I'm just going to give people a few minutes to type here. I mean, yeah, and I don't mind talking about event coordination. So I'll like, since Prince brought this up, and I'll let other people type, and I'll get to everyone's comments and questions as quickly as possible. One of the things that like we really always lean on is we want players to be able to, we want players to suggest event ideas. I will say that like this season was probably the lowest number of player driven events that I've seen on PARP in quite some time. And so I encourage you guys. So the idea is if you guys want to do an event, please pitch it to us and tell us what the mechanics look like and what makes sense. And we can't always do everything, and some things just won't work for A, B, or C reasons, but we'll always try and take what you've submitted and work it into something that is doable. So please submit ideas for events. You know, if you've got something that's compelling or interesting or something you haven't seen before or something you'd like to see come back, by all means, submit that, because we have lots of ideas, but we want to enable players. And so what you should be thinking about when you submit an event and you want to do an event planning, you should think about what do you want to happen? What help do you need from staff, right? And how can we enable this event, and why is it you know, like something that we can help with? Just want to say thank you so much and all the staff. No, and thank you guys. Like honestly, like I think part of the reason why we enjoy doing what we do is because we love the community. Like I wouldn't spend a bunch of my personal time doing something that I didn't see value in and that I didn't enjoy. Staff are like volunteers, and we, you know, like we only have so much time to dedicate to something, but like it truly, like it lights up our lives when we're able to do something and see people like walking away from it. And when we see people excited about something, like that makes our day. Like we want you guys to love your time here. We work really hard on that, and we appreciate that you guys enjoy it. So thank you for that. One thing that I am seeing, Robbery Workshop. So basically, I don't, let's just say, Alice, as far as an RP Robbery Workshop, I got something fun planned. I'm not going to say too much about it, but just stay tuned. You're gonna get something fun in that regard. So that's something that's absolutely been on our radar. Me and a couple of other people have been working on something for a while. It's just been about really having the time to like make it perfect. So there is definitely something cool and exciting in that realm that's coming in. Nikki said how to deal with self inserts when the RP is not making sense or when the vibe is being killed. That's a challenging one because I mean, you know, like I was saying before, if there's something going on in the RP and someone walks in and they're like not acting like appropriate to the situation, that's when you can kind of be like, hey man, like get out of here. Like, you know, like we're having a conversation here. Like everyone's paying attention to what's going on. You seem to be in another world, leave. And if they don't leave, then you escalate and you're like, okay, cool. If you don't want to leave, well, here's my gun in your face. Now you can leave and take it from there. I think it is difficult to, always guarantee that there's not going to be like someone, you know, quote unquote, killing the vibe. It is very difficult to do. But you know, we're we definitely don't want it to be a situation where someone's coming in and like ruining someone's experience, and we're always listening. So if that's happening, or if that's something that like, you know, you guys are noticing from a particular like situation or a particular interaction, and you have a recording of it, by all means submit it to us, and we're, you know, we're really, really, really trying very hard to make sure that everyone has a good time. Cool. I'll give another minute just for people to finish typing any questions they have, and then I think we're going to aim to wrap things up in the next 5-ish minutes. Again, this will not be the last RP workshop. We'll do more of these. I'm always excited to chat with you guys. Also, and actually, sorry, I know I've been doing a ton of talking, but is there anyone else from the staff team that wants to like add anything, or? How many of these will happen? I mean, honestly, it really comes down to our like availability. And one of the things that we're going to be, we're working really hard on making sure that like season 11 is going to be a super interesting and engaging story. So that is priority number 1, is just making sure that that gets off the ground. And then once we have the momentum of that story moving, then I think we will open up to more RP workshops as people need them. You know, another thing too, if you need help like workshopping a character, please feel free to submit an RP ticket and say, hey, I'm trying to, you know, like come up with this idea. Can you give me some inspiration? Or can you like, I'm struggling with how to make this one dynamic work. Like, can you give me some advice? Blah, 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 blah. How would you work with a player antagonist group without it seeming like meta people that are just trying to kill? I mean, that's really, to me, it's just rooted in motivation. Like if you're an antagonist group and you have a really good motivation for why you're doing what you're doing, and it is for actually fun RP, then I think that's really the best way to do it, versus just being like, we're just murderous psychopaths. Like that's not very compelling. Please do more events. We fully plan on it. Getting rid of the vines in short rest is basically impossible, because like the mechanically trying to get rid of them is like physically annoying. We have to right click on every single tile and then like delete it through the brush tool. The only thing that I can think of is we just burn the whole thing down, but I don't think that's fun for anyone either. But the other thing I will say is that like, as far as that, I mean, we'll see. I can't commit to anything. All I will say is that like our energy is 100% invested right now in the next season. Everyone's working very hard at bringing like some cool ideas to the table. So you can get rid of them. It's just being lazy. Actually, it's not just being lazy, my friend. It is really like mechanically difficult. There's like hundreds of those tiles, if not thousands, and right-clicking thousands of times and deleting and deleting and deleting would literally take us, you know, like 6 to 10 hours. And we're not going to spend 6 to 10 hours that we could be devoting to season 11 getting rid of the vines. So it is difficult. If it was easy, we would have probably done it already. All right. We got 2 more minutes. Yeah, I mean, Clem, to your point, like, we know that short rest got laggy as a result of the vines. Like, it is what it is. And part of us doing certain things and trying certain things is learning from them. And let's just say we won't be littering any communities with vines in the future, so you guys don't have to worry about that. As far as next season, stay tuned. You guys are going to hear on that very, very soon. No, and I appreciate everyone's excited about season 11. Like, I honestly don't mind everyone asking, because it just goes to show that people are stoked and they really want to jump in. What I will say is that starting a new season, just so everyone understands, like, it's not as simple as just like wiping the server and putting a new map on. There's like weeks of work that we as a team, we have to go in. There's so much stuff that we have to physically do. And it's just a lot. Like, there's an enormous amount of work of testing, retesting, adding a mod, removing it, doing it again, rebooting, doing it again. And we're now at a point where things are looking real good. And like I said, we have previously, the reason why we don't announce dates is because if I tell you guys that it's on X date and we run into a technical problem that we're like, oh shit, like this is going to take us an extra week, I think people would rather us announce a date that we stick to than us announce a date that moves, because then people won't have confidence in us when we announce those dates. Like, it is, like, without getting into specifics, the amount of work that it takes. Like, this is why we have a technical team and we have the world builder team, because we really need to like split our energy and have one team that is devoted on the technical side, making sure that the server is actually working, that the mods are good, that the map is good. You know, it's crazy the amount of work that the tech team does to do that. So like, mad respect to all the techs. And also, huge respect to the world builder team, because they're coming up with something real fun this season. You guys are going to like it. I'm sure you guys all saw ADC's video. And all I can say is just, I'm sure you guys are going to be very happy soon. So just stay tuned, and we will have news for you coming in soon. It's killing me not to, like, I wish I could just tell you guys a date. Like, I would love to, but just a little bit longer, guys. Just hold out a little bit longer. Okay. It's not going to be a month. Let's just say that. Okay. Before we split, because there's a lot of chatting going on. I'm sure we've been here for 3 hours. People start to get antsy. So the last thing that I would like to say and finish on is that, look, we don't have a server or RP or stories to tell without our player base. You guys are the magic makers. Yes, we have to do all this work to get the server working, making sure that it's running smooth, of course. But without people to play and spend their valuable time engaging with the stories that we come up with and building a cool community of people who all vibe and can have like a lot of fun, it means nothing. So you guys are, we know the server is dead. That's it's the end of season. It's very typical. It's going to be very not dead very soon. So I just want to say thank you guys. Like, thank you to every single one of you. You all bring something interesting and unique and creative. It's fun seeing the OG players continue to do cool and exciting things. It gets me super excited seeing new people who it's their first season and they're just like, oh, this is like, I just got here and I'm having so much fun. Like, that's the kind of stuff that keeps me coming back for more and makes me want to, and on all the other staff, to work really hard for you guys. And so I hope in season 11, the work that we're putting in hits the mark. I hope you guys really enjoy what's going to be coming. And I will just say, stay tuned. Okay, Nick is going to get the last question of the night, and then we're gonna break. When will bios open? So what we are, I mean, I can't tell you exactly the date. What I'm going to tell you guys is that there will be an announcement. The date will be announced. We will also be giving you some sense of the world and what's going on so that you guys can create your characters and you know what is going on. What is my character like? What is their blah, 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 blah. We will be archiving all of the season 10 stuff. We will be putting up all the season 11 posts, and then you guys. So basically, the second that we announce the new season, the bios will open, the bulletin board and all that other stuff. Obviously, no one will be posting until it starts, but all of the things that you guys need in order to get your characters ready will be announced all at the same time. So just sit tight, stay tuned, and I'm sure you guys are going to be very, very happy with what we have in store for you. Oh, guys, it's my pleasure. Honestly, hanging with you guys and getting to chat about this stuff is super fun. So, super appreciate everyone's time. We'll break for now. Keep coming to these sessions. It's awesome to see that we had so many people in attendance. This is way more than we had. I think the first RP workshop, we maybe had 10 or 15 people. So seeing this many people come out and spend your Friday night hanging with us and chatting, fucking rules. So I'm super grateful to you all. We're gonna work really hard for you to make sure next season is sick, and you might see Simple Jace in the future. Who knows? There's a spoiler for you. All right, guys. With that being said, we're gonna end today's call. I will make sure that everyone has the RP workshop video and document and everything you need to go back if you want to catch something. We'll be sending some feedback out for folks, so we want to know what the next workshop is going to be about, and we'll go from there. Powder Kegers rule. Until next time, thank you all, and we'll see you in character.